Great. I always like that recording in progress thing. That's always it's always a good listening thing to hear. But anyway, people are gonna come into the room. I always love how Zoom takes its time to bring all the attendees into the room. Uh, and once again, my name is Ari Rosenbaum. Uh, Still is, hasn't changed from yesterday. And again, welcome to day two of that 4K National Virtual Conference. If you missed any part of yesterday or you didn't attend yesterday, again, it's a free event. So it's like, when you go to some of these back when the day when we had all these live events and you spent thousands of dollars, you wanted to get every little second and attend every breakout session and whatnot. And this is a free event, and to ask people to these days to stick around 4 hours each day, it's hard. So if you go to YouTube, yesterday's event is already up. I got the video last night after watching the Rangers lose again to the Islanders again for the second night in a row. I was able to put up the presentation. Um, and of course, as people will note, I'm wearing a different Ranger jersey and a different Ranger hat from yesterday. I don't want people to suggest that I'm wearing the same clothes 2 days in a row. So we did that. But anyway, again, the purpose of these virtual events, it's an offshoot of a national event that I ran at Disney 6 years ago, right around COVID. I mean, when I say right around COVID, we left Wednesday and the park closed on Sunday. So that was a snake bitten event. I swore to myself I would never do that again. So we've been doing it virtually, which has been working out great for the last 6 years. You can even see the presentations for the last 6 years up on YouTube as well. And of course, these events are to promote the live events. We'll be in Chicago in April and Denver in May, and hopefully Washington, D.C. for the first time in September. Sponsorships start as little as $500, $1,500 to speak. I have not raised those prices since we first started these events in 2018. Contact me for further information. It's a lot of fun. $100 to attend, $50, multiple attendees from the same firm. Go to the ballpark. Joe, you were there in Miami, I remember. It's a lot of
Yep.
fun. In Miami, it was a great event. It was because it was a game against the Mets, so we had a game that night, and it was like 80% Mets fans. We had Charles Johnson as the guest. We had a nice stadium tour. We saw all the bobbleheads, which again I saw at the Winter Classic. Um, and of course I have those events. Go to that 4ksite.com. And then, of course, the books are available on Amazon. I have that 401k plan provider handbook, 27 years of seeing things and taking notes and seeing what works and what doesn't. And Joe could vouch for the things that I saw that don't work anymore. But it's available $9.99, I think, on Kindle, $11.99 paperback. The other books there as well. So uh, that's it for my introduction. I always give myself 15 minutes and I usually finish myself at three. So then that means that my good friend Joe Caruso, who I've known forever, um, we have a common friend, and same thing with Bill Shore is, uh, I should have mentioned his name yesterday, and I dedicated that 401k plan provider handbook to him, Rich Larita. Um, and Rich Larita, I always will have to say, there's a part of Rich in every event I've ever done. Rich is like the Kevin Bacon of the retirement plan world in my mind, because the best people I've ever met in this business, there's Joe, Bill Shorey's, a whole bunch of other people, all because of Rich Larita. And if you don't know Rich Larita was the greatest 401k salesperson I ever knew. Even though I jokingly always say I don't think he could have spelled 401k if I spotted him the four, the O, the one, and the K. He was great at what he did, not because he knew anything, because I swore I don't think he knew anything about 401k plans. What he knew about was human beings and relationships and how to treat people. And he has been gone. It's crazy to think he's been gone since 2007.
Yeah.
It's almost 19 years ago. And people will come up to me and still mention Rich, advisors that I know that I met through Rich. So I always have to start off with something about Rich, and I don't think I would be where I am today without Rich Larita. And I know if there is a heaven, he's probably cursing me out that I didn't wasn't doing and helping him with that stuff, 18, 20 years ago. So without further ado, Joe Caruso, who is in my mind the greatest insurance mind in the retirement plan space. Despite I got him in a mess or two, he still doesn't hold that against me. So, Joe, take it away.
Not at all. Ari, I pass along the same sentiments. There isn't a day I don't live and think of Rich. I've got a picture of Rich on my bureau. Um, so Uncle Rich, as my kids called him.
Yeah, I'm looking.
I miss him
Yeah,
dearly.
yeah, I'm looking right now. I'm in my den, and I'm looking right now, and I have an autographed picture of Hank Aaron, and I never met Hank Aaron. And if you know anything about Rich, Rich was. I even know Larry Davis because of Rich, and Larry books my events, and Larry's kind of like an uncle to my son, and that's because of Rich.
I've got a card that Rich gave me.
Yeah,
Maybe you can see it. It's
yeah,
Yogi. It's
yeah.
Yogi.
There's a
Sits here
picture.
right on my desk.
Yeah, there's a picture of Hank Aaron, and I'm looking at it. And Rich was a big collector of sports memorabilia, bigger than I was. I'm sure now I'm bigger. But when he passed away, his widow Krista said, "Ari, you can, I'm going to sell this." She sold it to an advisor, a friend of ours. Pick one item. And I said, Rich Larita was the 401k salesperson king. So I got to take the home run king. So the funny thing about Hank Aaron photo, it was in my office, uh, where I had an office down here, I still do, and I had 5 feet of water there during Hurricane Sandy, and that nothing touched that frame was not touched at all. I lost other stuff. I lost my Bucky Dent, Mike Torres photo, but I did not lose Hank Aaron. So wherever, every single time I see that, I always think of him. But I always think of him every day. But let's get to the task at
Well,
hand.
the one thing I will say is let's learn from what Rich passed from, and he passed from the most curable cancer, which is prostate cancer. So what I recommend
No, he did.
everybody,
It was actually colon cancer.
well, but it was, yeah. So go get the things that you need to do. Take
Yeah,
care of your health. That's the most important thing that
yeah,
you need to, that I
yeah.
think for the
Rich,
most,
Rich had colon cancer that spread to his liver. By the time it
he
was
had Mets. Yep.
January
So
2006, he was dead by March 2006. He did not reach the age of 40.
April, April.
It was April. That's right. March, I left Geller, so that's why I get confused. It was April, actually. You're right.
So,
Yeah,
so God bless you,
colonoscopy.
my
Yeah,
friend. So thank
yeah.
you, Ari. So one of the topics near and dear to me, and I think everybody probably doesn't sleep well at night, is thinking about cyber and cyber crimes and cyber coverage, being hacked. What happens? How do I handle it? Um, what do I do next? So we're going to talk about three different disciplines or three different areas about the essential of cyber insurance, cyber crimes for RIAs, TPAs, and record keepers. And just as a footnote, before we got on the air, Ari and I were talking about one of the things that I always try to tell people, even personally, if you have children, one of the things I always recommend is when your child turns 18, get their credit file locked because you never know what's going to happen. You never know where that information, where their information is gone. Get their credit file locked so as they grow up and become a productive adults, they have protected credit files so that nobody can do any damage. So I leave you there from a personal standpoint. But on the cyber side, so we're going to talk about RIAs, TPAs, and record keepers. Three different areas, three different disciplines, three things that I think from a standpoint of keeping you up at night. It always keeps me up at night, knowing where my information is. I mean, you can Google yourself today and you can see your birthday's out there, where you've lived, what you've done, and that is very attractive to bad actors. And bad actors are swimming downstream. They're not going after the Fortune 500 companies. They're moving downstream and moving downstream all the way into retirement plans, small advisors, RIAs, broker dealers, TPAs, and record keepers. So that's really what we're going to talk today. I've got a colleague, Danny Strife, here, who's going to kick off the first two slides. So, Danny,
He's there.
okay, well, we'll move onwards then. Uh, so, Ari, want to move to the next slide? Give you one more shot, Dan. You there? Nope. Okay. So why cybersecurity matters? When we look at where we have come from, uh, the effects of COVID, we have seen cybercrime spike as we all moved home to work under the issues we dealt with the pandemic and COVID. Uh, we weren't braced for or ready for working at home. We didn't have multiple MFA, multi-factor authentication. We weren't ready. So a lot of issues came about when we moved to working from home. Um, the SEC making cybersecurity a priority moving forward within the new year here. So if you become under an SEC audit, one of the things they're going to look at is where are you in regards to the Reg SP? And Reg SP is in effect today for larger RIAs with 1.5 billion or over. And later on this year, if you're under that amount, Reg SP will become an issue for smaller RIAs. And I believe that is, I want to say June, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So if you're a smaller RIA, you need to be compliant with Reg SP. And if you're a larger RIA, Reg SP is in effect today. And that is something that they're going to come back and make part of the audit. Let me see your Reg SP policies and procedures. And that is your playbook for how you handle data breaches. And that is the playbook you will run by. So last in 2024, in fact, I've updated it. I just pulled it down. In 2024, we saw 16.6 billion cyber attacks. So last year in 2025, there was 150 to 200 billion in losses from cyber attacks. Uh, Hard dollar. Now, soft dollar effects of that were anywhere between 500 billion and $1 trillion, meaning lost time, software, computers. So from the standpoint of when we look at cybersecurity, realizing there is hard dollars that are lost and then soft dollars that are lost. So we saw that spike up last year. We went from to 500 billion to almost $1 trillion in soft dollar losses. Now, when you look at your own cyber policies, these are things that you need to understand that you have to have certain coverages in there, and we'll get into that. Okay. We look at ERISA fiduciaries face possible personal liability for the data breaches that happen. Uh, and the biggest issue I always tell people, it's not if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. Yes, you're going to get hacked. You're going to happen. You're going to get an email, you're going to click on it, and you're going to move forward, and you're not going to realize what happened and where it came from. And those are the things that you need to address every single day. Those are the things that keep me up at night. What am I clicking on? What am I getting as an email? Are these good quality emails? Do I know the person? Because you see the emails today that you get. I mean, they look like they're coming from Ari and they're not. It's amazing. So, um, Ari,
It's
next
so,
slide.
yeah, I'm literally getting like uh an email a week from my HR departments about benefits packages and all that stuff. And I'm like, everybody knows I've never hired an employee and I never will. So.
Um, we welcome questions. If anybody has any questions, please jump in. This is to be most interactive. in
Yeah,
that case?
we'll answer the questions at the end as we usually do.
Okay. Okay. When we look at retirement plans, why are they a target? Well, there are a lot of reasons why we're a target. One is the vast amounts of personal financial data that's in there. Social Security, PIA, personal information, account numbers. Generally, you have banking account information, access to systems online, withdrawals, loans that you're able to access, either that through the portal of the administrator or the portal of sometimes the fund families, wherever it may be. So, and then the other factor is you've got multiple service providers in there, TPAs, record keepers, investment managers, fund companies. So, and then most importantly, these are high value target uh, issues. So we're dealing with identity theft, fraud in that case. So all of this information is housed inside of a retirement plan. Boy, there's gold in those hills. Yeah, there is. I mean, think about that. Think if you've got 100 participants, you've got 100 plan participants, email account, social security number, balances, banking information. Um, pretty, pretty lucrative stuff to go out there and garner in security. And what happens if you get a breach? Danny, you there? Okay. All right, next slide. Regulatory requirements. The SEC now requires RIAs, as we've talked about, under Reg SP and Reg SID on the retirement side to have cybersecurities. All DOL cyber guidance applies to all ERISA plans. And as we've seen, if there is a data breach, you do trigger fiduciary issues with inside the plan. And those fiduciary issues can either be on the 316, the 321, or the 338 side, or ultimately, as the DOL says, the ultimate fiduciary being the plan sponsor. Even if those plans are in a MEP or a PEP. Absolutely. People think just because they're not named the 402AC doesn't mean they don't have the fiduciary liability. They do. So under the new SEC notifications that came out, which are the new Reg SP and the Reg SP ID, so the security breaches, you need to have your playbook up to date. And those are things that the SEC is going to come knocking if there is an audit. Okay. And all the plan sponsors need to be accountable for the 316, the 321, or the 338. You need to understand what their security policies are. Do they have Reg SP, or excuse me, Reg SID satisfied? These are things that are going to come back as you as the plan sponsor or the administrator or the 338. So they're all intertwined and intertwined. So when we looked at last year, we looked at last year some of the larger breaches that happened. The one notable one, obviously, is pension specialist. Big breach. They're still vetting out what the cost is. Um, the breach was, they said, almost 71,000 plan participants. Think about that. 71,000 plan participants. Are you going to run to the next slide? When we look at cyber breaches inside of a 401k, they do trigger fiduciary responsibility. And those responsibilities are have you set up policies and procedures, selected and monitor the service providers, security. Those are things that you need to look at from not just from selecting, but on an annual basis. I would say compliance is an investment. It's not an expense. You need to make sure that you're looking over the shoulder of the 338, the 321, and the 316. So the TPA and the record keeper, because if they have a breach, it goes across all of the service providers. When we look at conduct regular assessments of audits. So we talked yesterday about plan audits. Part of your plan audit should be what is the security protocols that the TPA, the record keeper, and the 338 have in place? Huh? Absolutely. So those are things that, and then if there is a breach, the notification and the response plan, which is embedded inside your your Reg S ID and your Reg S SP plans in there. So those are things that you need to be proactive on. Um, the biggest issue really is going to come about when we look at the plan specialist. Um, How do you mitigate that? How do you now, if there is a breach, what happens? What does it cost? Okay. All right, the next slide. So the potential cost of RIA, the immediate cost is you've got to report the incident. We've got to identify where it came from. We've got to send out the notifications. And then most importantly, part of the remedy is the credit monitoring services. These are all costs that are embedded inside of excuse me, of a cyber policy, and as well as business income replacement are generally inside of a cyber policy. So you've got regulatory fines and lawsuits. Those penalties and fines are covered inside of a cyber policy. At what limit you have to identify those things, okay? And then obviously the business impact, the reputation, the client loss, and the disruption. When we look at what the cost is, and there was a broker dealer last year, late last year, that had a cyber breach. They had about 8,500 clients. Okay. They got fined $325,000 by the SEC. They had to go through forensics, identify where the breach came from. And then the last piece was credit monitoring. $8,500, excuse me, 8,500 clients at generally anywhere between $100 to $150 a year. And that's on the cheap side. Think about that. 8,500 times 100 is 850,000. Clients always ask, how much coverage do I need? Well, if you've got 8,500 plan participants or 15,000 plan participants, and there's an incident and you're required to put credit monitoring service out there, and you've only got 1 million or 500,000, guess what? You're digging into your own pocket to pay for that. When you look at a small to medium-sized TPA or record keeper who's got 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 plan participants, $1 million gets vaporized very, very quick. So one of the things I always tell clients is let's identify what the worst case scenario is because it's going to be hard to identify that. But when we look at the credit monitoring service, right? That's anywhere between $100 to $150. Okay. The forensic cost, the attorney fees, right? The fines, $1 million gets vaporized very, very quickly. So, any questions on any of this so far?
Uh, Mike, friend of the show, had a question.
Mr. Webb, what question do you have?
He has he'll ask it here. How often should I log into my retirement plan account, and does your answer change if I'm a high balance participant?
I would say myself, I probably check it weekly. But you want to go back and really look at those balances from a standpoint of, that's me. I'm OCD. So from that
I
standpoint,
do 3 to 5 times a day, but it's a whole nother story.
um, I would say, Mike, at minimum, at least once a month. Um, if you're looking at a balance that's over a 500,000, yeah. I mean, because you know, you need to identify fairly quickly what happened to your balance. If you didn't take anything out and nobody's called you to say, "Hey, Mike, did you initiate this loan or this withdrawal?" Um, bells should be going off. And those are things that are built in today's environment is most TPAs and record keepers and custodians, if there is a withdrawal, are doing some sort of secondary layer or third layer of authenticating. is this a valid transaction? Has Mr. Webb initiated a loan? Has he initiated um, a withdrawal from his 401(k) or his plan? So there again, I think if you're young, got a balance of, somewhere under 250,000 or under, yeah, it's probably not as likely that someone's going after yours, but I say that and then probably tomorrow it'll happen. But those are things that I think you really need to identify for yourself. So, and what your level of comfort of checking that balance every.
Oh, oh, what did I do? Oh, Joe, you're unmuted. You gotta, you muted yourself. I don't know what happened here.
I didn't touch anything.
I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Okay. So when you look at some of the custodian requirements that have been out there, right? Schwab, Fidelity, Pershing, and then as at the end of last year, Altruist overall required um, insurance coverages, um, whether it be E&O, whether it be crime, or most importantly, cyber insurance. And then really the requirements, the endorsements having certain endorsements on your cyber policy, mainly fraudulent funds transfer, which would mitigate somebody like coming into Mr. Webb's account and absconding any of his money, or social engineering. Those are the components that you really need to look at. Um, those two areas, those endorsements generally are capped. Most carriers will only write 250. Some of them will go to 500,000. If you are a TPA or a record keeper, there are other, or an investment advisor or 338, there are other alternatives to increase those areas, and we have strategies to do that for our clients, and we do that every single day. So um, you have to understand, you have to think about why did Schwab, why did Fidelity, why did Pershing, and now Altruist all mandate it from a custodian standpoint, um, E&O insurance, crime insurance, and cyber insurance. It's because stuff was happening. The custodians were writing checks. They were opening up their checkbook and having to indemnify plans and RIA clients out there. And they said, no mas, no more. We don't want to take this risk. We're going to push it and mandate that insurance. And I will say this, not all the insurance policies are the same. I can show you two policies from the same carrier at somewhat similar prices, and the coverages are different and the endorsements are different. And th those that's what makes a strong policy, is making sure that you have all the endorsements that you need. On a crime policy, it's not just first party, it's third party coverage for a TPA and a record keeper. If you're not a producing TPA or record keeper, yeah, you're now you're placing, you have an advisor coming in and placing business with you. Well, how well do you know this advisor? Well, I've heard of him. I've never had him. Now you want to make sure that there isn't an issue. So you want to make sure that there are certain endorsements. On a crime policy, I always tell people, if the TPA or record keeper is not producing it, we need to add third person endorsement on the crime policy. And not all the endorsements are going to be available from all these carriers. Um, as you can imagine, carriers don't like to pay claims. So they'll put every obstacle in the way of having to pay that claim. So that's our job, to partner with you guys in making sure that you're with the appropriate carrier. You're with an A-rated carrier. There's a lot of carriers out there. There's a carrier out there that's been in the TPA and record keeping business for years. And most people don't realize, I'm not going to name him, most people don't realize that that insurance company is owned by one guy, and they only have revenue of about 12 to 15 million dollars. And yet, for some reason, they think they own the Arisa bond business. And it's a pretty dangerous carrier. I say carrier in the sense that it's only one individual that owns that insurance company. We deal with all A-rated multiple billion-dollar insurance companies. So um, we do offer free reviews of your policy or help you build good quality cyber policies in there. So, all right, next slide.
Sure.
What does cyber insurance cover? Well, what is it? What is inside? What's under the hood? Obviously, data breach investigation and forensics. They need to pay for that. Notification, credit monitoring costs. Okay, ransomware payments and extortions, and then legal defense and fines and regulatory penalties. And then most of them do carry business interruption and business loss in there as well. So when you look at maybe not a 338 because the 338 is getting paid on the assets, but a TPA might have an issue in if there is a breach, how does that affect new business coming in? Sometimes that will be a business interruption or business slowdown. We can address those issues with the carrier as well. So these are the things, these are the components inside a policy that make every carrier and every policy different. I can tell you, and as I said earlier, um, every policy is different based upon the client. I could, as I said earlier, I could show you two policies from the same carrier. Some endorsements are there, some aren't in there. So it really is into the intellectual capital we bring to the table. So, all right, next slide. TPAs and record keepers, responsibilities. You guys all know this. You need to maintain insurance coverages, provide breach notification. You need to identify where the breach is. You need to identify what regulatory agencies. You need to identify what states you're in. You need to identify and notify every single state that you act in and have a client in. You need to tell that state that you've had a data breach. And you need to also tell the regulatory agencies. If you are an RIA, you need to obviously get out and tell the SEC and most importantly, the DOL. So implement strong access controls and audits and trials, for compliance reasons. As I said, I tell every client, compliance is an investment. It's not an expense. It will pay dividends. And a lot of times, a lot of the policies that we bring to the table for you have um, payments for compliance reviews. On the RIA side, a lot of times we'll look at mock audits being covered for the RIAs. So compliance is a tool, it's a necessary tool, and it's valid. You need to kick the tires. You need to understand what's happening in your organization under the hood. Next slide, Ari. Vendor selection and best practice. This would really be on the plan sponsor side, evaluating the service providers, requiring cyber certificates and audits, and most importantly, verifying that they have coverage. That seems a little interesting. Although I have a cert, do I need to make sure that I might be added as an additional insured under a cyber policy for a TPA or a record keeper? That's a great idea. I always tell clients, you need to be added to theirs as an additional insured. So these are things that we strategize with every single TPA, record keeper, and 338, and then ultimately with the plan sponsors. So reviewing data breach response procedures, conduct periodical security assessments. Where's the data coming from, right? How are you getting it? Oh, you know, Ari sending me to in a file. Oh, is that file encrypted? Is it locked? These are things that we have to think about every single day. You know, no longer is it, oh, send me that census file and I'll email it here. I want it to be locked. I want it to be encrypted. I want it. Those are things that we think about and we should be doing every single day. And we don't. So, next slide. Building your cyber program. We need to identify, assess, and plan, implement, monitor, and then ultimately look at the responses. I think these are things that we've all covered already. But most importantly, the policies and the training and the security when we implement these procedures and these policies with either Reg SP or Reg SID have an assessment that you need to identify. Where is the census information coming from? Where is it going? What are we looking at from a payroll load? These are things from the retirement standpoint. We look at and we hear every single day, and we just assume, oh, okay, we move to another plan sponsor, move to another payroll vendor. Oh, how are we getting that feed? Is it a secure API or is it just we're sending an Excel spreadsheet to the record keeper or we're getting an Excel spreadsheet from the payroll company? Big flags should be going off. So those are things that we used to do in the past. We have to we have to really securitize the data and the information out there. Next slide. Key takeaways. Cybersecurity is now a fiduciary duty. Yes. Okay. Breaches are inevitable. Prepare accordingly. Cyber insurance is an essential risk management. Absolutely. You don't want to be a Walenda out there. You don't want to fly without a net. Absolutely. So, um, vendor management is critical. Understanding what the TPA, what the record keeper, what the 338, and ultimately what the plan sponsor, um, what's their vendor selection, what their cybersecurity protocol are. Okay. And ultimately, compliance will be scrutinized all the time. Um, and then I leave you with the last one. Um, well, and that is it. Any questions that you have?
What are
Anybody?
the, yeah, I mean, what are some of the stories that you've been hearing lately? I mean, there have been certain cases, plan sponsors. I want to say, I don't even know what happened with the Estee Lauder case. But I mean, where are you seeing like, the biggest exposures? To me, back in the day, I would get, at Geller, it would be the participant with the stolen mail
Oh,
and,
it's everywhere, Ari.
you
I
know,
mean, I wish there was one um, channel that this all this stuff was coming from. I mean, it's I'm going to say it comes from even maybe not shredding your mail or your documents. Those are things that are kind of silly, but yeah, I've seen clients get hacked based upon someone going through their garbage. You're a 338 and you're taking investment statements and throwing them in the garbage, and the garbage just going out in the garbage. You got people dumpster diving. Um, it's the bad actors are widening and they're getting deeper. The strategies they're coming up with are unbelievable. We've all gotten emails from what looks like Ari Rosenbaum, but it's not Ari. It's you gotta be alert. You gotta be diligent. You gotta make sure that the information that you're getting from a reliable source and that it's secured. Don't send me a PDF with someone's social security. I will cringe. I won't accept it. Like, what did you just do? Now you just put me at risk. And that's the thing you have to understand. That's how a lot of these data breaches happen. When you look at pension specialists, they got hacked a year prior and thought, oh, yeah, we're fine. And then what happened? Boom, it snowballed.
no, I mean, it's
So,
it's really easy. I mean, the perfect example was, I want to say a month ago, and I'm not, somebody hacked my Target account. Um, and here's the funniest thing. They hacked my Target account and they ordered like a breast pump to pick up in the Bronx. And I'm like, Ari Rosenbaum picking up a breast, and I'm like, I'm calling the store. I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, like, and apparently you don't need an ID to pick up something that you ordered on Target.com.
oh yeah, and those drop boxes, like if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, where you've already prepaid it and they put it into a locker for you, and they give you the code. You don't have to show anything to anybody. I mean, cyber crimes are everywhere.
And
Um,
it's just amazing. They will always think of something new. Like I said,
oh,
it has to admit, I would get an email a week like, here's a real estate closing settlement form. And if you know anything about me, the last real estate closing I did was on my house 23 years ago. It's just fascinating. And people get, it's some smart people fall for this because it looks, like I said, the Coinbase thing. The very first time I got a phone call on Coinbase, the guy sounded a little bit legitimate, and he's like, "Well, I'm like, do what you got to do, leave me out of it." And of course, the call went nowhere. But I could have given him a couple $100,000 in Bitcoin, and I'd be screwed.
15 years ago, Ari, I had a record keeper got called up from and somebody they said, "Oh, can you pay your? We're going to send you an email instead of sending us a check this month. Can you wire us our payment?" And the girl who answered the phone, yeah, sure. I had the account. They had the account number. They had the name. Boom. So the end of the month came, and they wired out. I think it was $275,000 to the client. About a week or two later, goes by, and this is one of the larger clients that they had, and they called up and said, "Hey, is everything okay?" "Yeah, why?" We didn't get paid this month." "What do you mean you're getting paid this month?"
Right?
Somebody called us a week prior to normally, and they said, "Oh, we got a new bank account. We want you to wire that money in." It comes from anywhere. It comes from any uh, bad actor. I mean, I wish to tell you that all the bad actors come through the front door. They don't. They come through the back window. They come through everywhere now. It's so these guys come up with more schemes and all they have to do is be successful once, where we have to be protective 100% of the time.
They're
And think
always
about
coming
that.
up with something new. Yeah. I mean, I always had that running joke. I'm from Brooklyn. You're gonna have to wake up earlier in the morning to pull one over on me. And it's just really, I've just been very, very lucky that, I can tell the nonsense, but it's scary because, we grew up in an industry where everything was done by pen and paper and whatnot. And the ability to do all these transactions online, to get a hardship distribution, to get a loan. It's just it's beautiful that the technology allows it, but it becomes a recipe for disaster.
I know a TPA and record keeper out in the Midwest that will actually let you come to their office and pick up a withdrawal, a loan check. I'm like, what? How do you allow that? How do you know that person is that person? Like,
Why else would they be coming up? Right?
um, I can't stress it enough. Um, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, because it's going to happen. It's when is it going to happen? You're going to get hacked. You're going to get breached. You're going to have an issue. Everybody does, whether it be a credit card or a true cyber attack. It happens. We've all had our credit card stolen at some point. And think of that. That is the tip of the spear. That now they've got all the information and it's out there. Trust me, Ari, your information is out there. My information is out there, and it's been sold time and time again on the black side. So that's
I got another question for you. What are you seeing from TPAs as a best practice in providing cybersecurity details slash process and procedures when you're requested from them?
I wish I had 10 minutes to time. It really is the process. It really is understanding where the information is coming from and how you're receiving that information. Identifying best practice. Um, it's I would say give me a call. You've got my number there. I'd love to be able to explain that, how we can help you strategize for that. Um, but it's the things that we should be doing. Multi-factor
Yes.
authentication, identifying that this is Ari, those are the things, we want to be trusting. Oh, it's Ari on the phone. Yeah. Oh, it's
Right.
Danny. It's Joe. It's these we want to get the stuff off our desk and move on to other things in our day. We've got so many things, and that's when it happens. That's the vulnerability. So
Right. Okay.
be diligent.
Absolutely. Joe, it's always great as usual. I just always when we talk about topics, to me, this is one of the most chilling topics that, that
Every client I ask, all right, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? And you know what they all say? Cybersecurity.
yeah, to me,
Do I have enough? Am I doing enough?
it's
When is it going to happen?
it's a weapon of mass destruction. And I don't think that until and then it will happen where one of these TPAs is going to get hit for a very big sum, or a plan sponsor is going to get hit for a very big sum. But typically, the point of attack is going to be, unfortunately, the plan providers. They're always going to be the center. And to me, the TPA that processes the distributions is the most likely target because and unfortunately from experience we know that there are a lot of inexperienced people that work for TPAs, and that certainly could be an issue, so
Well,
we'll see what happens.
unfortunately, companies don't train people as much as they used to in years ago.
Right.
Oh, you've got that knowledge, you're hired. We don't invest in education and training anymore. So,
Right. Okay, guys, we will take a break until noon. I'm going to stop the recording. And for people that mentioned yesterday, yes, I do know that if we talk before we start back at noon, that everyone else can hear it. So there'll be no jokes of any kind, nothing to get me canceled. Please, yeah, I did get a good laugh from the texts from people like, by the way, we couldn't hear you talk. I'm like, you know what? I'm careful that way. I always know it's a hot mic. So
okay.
appreciate it. We'll be
All
back
right,
at,
thank you.
you got it.
Everybody have a good weekend.
We'll be
Stay
back at
warm.
12 with the virtual bunch. Thanks.
Thank you.
Back. Okay, we're back at noon. And of course, we did have the mic on. And I just want to say, for those who are watching YouTube, I professed my love for the Retireaholics. I think that that's still one of the greatest ideas ever created in the 401k plan space. So I wanted that on the record. And is this a knockoff of it? I don't think it's a knockoff. We don't have beer. We
About to
don't.
say, we got to start drinking if that's the
Yeah, we
case.
don't have funny graphics. Yeah, it'd be fun if we did like a whiskey or a bourbon club. Yeah, then I'm like,
There you
oh
go.
my God, they're stealing our idea. Um, yeah, it's funny about stealing ideas. There was somebody who they do conferences. It's a company that does conferences, and I think they did an event, I want to say Cleveland, right after we did Cleveland, and somebody said, they stole your idea. I said, people have been having events at stadiums way before I ever did. So I mean, I don't nobody stole that idea. But anyway,
There are no original ideas in this space. Everyone just takes it and you pirate it a little bit, you massage it, and you make it your own. So
yeah, exactly. So we have here, of course, Mike Webb, James Hollins, Bill Shores, and Bill is one of the people responsible for that 401k conference. I came up with the idea. It was him and Chris York, and they didn't say it was my original idea was I was going to do like a Comic-Con type idea, and Bill said that's not really good. And we got to the stadium idea, and he's like, "Oh yeah, actually that's better." But yeah, the Comic-Con idea because that would have meant people would come as dressed as cosplaying, Marsha Wagner or Whitney or something like that. And
We'll never
maybe
know.
maybe
That
maybe
could,
for the younger generation, now. That might you might have to do two, Ari. You might have to
yeah,
do
yeah,
maybe.
it's the cosplaying is always interesting. I go to these wrestling conventions and I got a buddy of mine dressed up as Dusty Rhodes, like polka dot Dusty Rhodes, and he's got pictures with Dusty's kids and Dusty's wife and daughter. It's really hilarious.
That's
But
fun.
let's get to the topic at hand. We only got an hour on this. Uh, I want to thank Mike Webb for creating these questions. A lot of cultural allusions with the questions, but mandatory Roth catch-ups. How many 70 disaster movies are less scary than dealing with mandatory Roth catch-ups?
Yeah. Zero. I don't think there are any, right, Mike?
Oh,
Oh
less
no, less
scary.
scary. All of them. I'm sorry. Yes,
Less
yeah,
scary.
less scary. Less
Piranha,
scary. Yes, yeah,
Piranha with the
yeah,
fake fish is definitely less
yeah.
scary. I'll put Piranha out there.
Well, there was the Frogs was a 70s movie like that. There was
What? The
Frogs.
frogs?
Yeah, there was a movie called Frogs. Yes. So
I don't
Google it,
remember
man.
that.
Go on IMDb.
All
Um,
right, I need confirmation from the
I'll
official
have to
source.
get covered, but to me, the three worst
uh,
horrible, the three worst disaster movies, and I'm a big disaster movie fan. The three worst at the top of my list, they're all Irwin Allen towards the end. When Time Ran Out is really awful with Paul Newman, and if you and Jacqueline Bisset, and Pat Morita is falling into like a volcano, and it looks so fake. Um, and if you, I think Larry King once asked, "Have you ever regretted any movie you ever made?" And it's like, yeah, that volcano movie. When Time Ran Out is terrible. Warm with Michael Caine is awful. And another Michael Caine disaster, my favorite disaster movie is the Poseidon Adventure. So the flip side, one of the worst ones is Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. So I just want to throw that out. But yeah, they're just as bad as Roth mandatory catch-ups.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
concept of Roth catch-ups, is frightening in that it was implemented to be a pay for, to pay for
Right.
other provisions in Secure 2.0. And just on that concept, it's a fallacy because the way Congress calculates pay-fors is they only look out 10 years. So while the Roth is providing revenue today, it's giving up all the revenue tomorrow. So it's not really covering a pay-for if you go beyond the 10-year window because you're paying tax now, but compounded, all this money is going to come out tax-free, which would have given the government even more money. So just on its premise alone, to be used to pay for other items in a bill, it was flawed from the start. And also, just for the record, my two favorite 70s disaster movies, I'm there with you on the Poseidon Adventure and then the Towering Inferno.
Oh
Yeah,
Towering
yes,
I was
yeah.
going
Inferno.
to say Towering Inferno. I
Towering
guess.
Inferno, which I have not been able to watch after September 11th. I think I maybe watched it once because it really like, but yeah, that I love that movie.
How do we feel about Earthquake? Just for the comedic value.
Earthquake,
That's it there, the comedic value. This the cameraman shaking the
Shaking.
camera. That's their
but
special
but
effects.
but when they saw it in the theaters, wasn't the theater shaking? Some of the theaters would like
It
shake.
was in it was in
Yeah,
Sensorround. In
Yeah,
Sensorround. That was the commercial in
which reminds me
Sensorround.
of a scene in Kentucky Fried Movie where they do that with this guy.
feel around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
feel around.
where this is
And
being shown in feel around.
yeah, I mean, Earthquake is good. I love the airport movies.
Yeah, well,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. So
oh my God, I love them all. My favorite one is
Even
probably
the
Airport
even the
79.
Concorde. You like the Concorde?
Concord is the best one because the, the airport
It's funny.
79, they're all good. 77, I'm not crazy about the whole idea that a plane would actually crash into the ocean and the fuselage wouldn't break up. But Airport
Oh,
79, they're doing stunts that no airplane could withstand. Uh, Somehow George Kennedy goes from like an airline executive or I think one movie was like baggage handler or something like that. Now he's the same guy and now he's a pilot of a Concorde, co-pilot, and he's shooting out a flare so the Mirage jets mistake it. It was just and there's Jimmy Walker's in it, and what's it? Martha Ray with the makeup, which they use that joke in Airplane.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's again that's
But
a favorite.
yeah, and on the Roth catch-ups, I mean, Ari, Mike, James, what's the scariest part? Is it the admin part of it? If people
yeah,
change
it's
jobs
Yeah,
mid-year,
it's
and
totally
how
the
do you
admin
keep
part
track of
yeah.
prior year?
because they basically said, like you said, Bill, like, okay, everybody do this and figure it out. And everyone's like, well, what
and
do you
it's
mean
got to
And
figure it
just
out? Like,
and it's
half
based on
the
last year's
payroll
payroll.
companies,
So
yeah. The record keepers
and
have
it's
no idea. They're still, and the thing is, they gave like 50 notices for people to hand out, and still no one has any idea what they're
Yeah.
supposed to do. It's like, okay, what am I gonna? So
I mean, why didn't they just use the HCE look
yeah,
that would have
instead
made
of
sense.
just
yeah.
doing this whole new thing that was 145 and then it wasn't really 145. We went In December we went to everybody, surprise, it's 150.
It should have
And
been a
like,
current year. Should have been a current year thing because essentially, if somebody switches jobs, they get a free ride because it's
Yep.
not, the employers that they're unrelated doesn't matter. But it's many
Yeah.
years ago when I was working at Geller, I did most of the legal work for the clients, and there'd be some outside ERISA attorneys, and there was one guy in California, he came up with an amendment for a client, and I'm reading it, and I said to the guy in conversions, I said, I understand what he's trying to do, but good luck trying to administer it. And this is one of those things where, anything in Washington that comes out of Washington, these are people who have no knowledge of how the retirement plan services industry works. And voila, we have we don't get I'm not getting the calls now. I will get the calls when people get close to that 145 limit.
Yeah.
And then the mistakes are gonna, there are not many people making $145,000 in the month of January. Certain plans. I mean, Bill's going to bring out the Houston Astros 5,500 about.
Well, I wasn't going to do that, but at least not yet.
But that's one industry where a guy can make 145 grand in a month. But yeah.
So I have a question for you. So, like, I've heard some companies already this year are withholding Roth catch-ups in January. So they're prorating it. So if you made over 150,000 last year, and I'm putting in 7% of pay, they're already withholding the pre-tax and a portion of it as Roth. Isn't that improper already? Don't you have to hit the pre-tax limit before you start taking catch-ups?
If you address it with a new election, that would work. But the problem is what happens when the guy terminates, and then he's going to have an accounting nightmare with his new employer if he's immediately eligible. I mean, that's
right. Because I thought under 414V, I think it is, that you shouldn't do catch-ups until the pre-tax is satisfied.
Catch-up theoretically does not count until you've hit the limit, and that was brought up 20 some odd years ago when catch-ups went first into existence. Was you can't have catch-up until you hit above the limit, which is the plan limit, the ADP limit, or the 402G limit.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Because I've seen companies doing that already, because it's a best efforts basis this year, and you have to show that you're trying, and companies are trying, but I don't think they're trying properly. But we'll see.
I honestly think this is the worst boondoggle since someone way back when thought the maximum exclusion allowance was a good idea for 403B plans. And it's just anything that requires people to think, is just bad. It's just bad. It's bad policy, it's bad everything. I would have much preferred that if they were gonna do it, let's go all the way. Let's make Roth mandatory default in every plan, unless you have otherwise. They would have collected the revenue. They would have collected the revenue that way. They would have collected the revenue that way. We would at least had this idiocy. I mean, this is just
and the problem is there's so many moving parts. You have the employer, you have the payroll company, you got the record keeper. Everyone's got a different approach to it. It's like, and then you're like, okay, now I got to make a whole new column, and it's just.
And you got people with multiple jobs, who make, if you combine it, they make over 145, and so they're going to have a tough time with their W-2 when they're trying to do their taxes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and just laugh out loud the people who are exempt from this: most lawyers, partners in a partnership, most other partners in a partnership, clergy, and certain government workers. So
clergy always get away.
Let's throw about three different disparate groups as possible and make them.
Clergy is one of the biggest rackets of all time. I mean,
now you got
oh my God,
you got to change your employer. We all have to become churches now. That's all.
Should have been a rabbi. But I didn't want to work on Saturdays. I like to travel. It's and the kosher food thing too is a big problem. But we'll see. It's a recipe for disaster, and so that's why I like how Mike connected it with the disaster movies. So let's get to the next topic: using AI to assist you, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah,
I stole that from you, Ari.
Yeah.
Oh, because you love that. I wrote that article, "The Good, the Bad, and the Fiduciary."
Yes.
Yep.
And I've said it for the 10 people that listen to the podcast. I love to bring my writing is, it goes back to a stunner, but I like to entertain myself. And so, like, how can I? And again, that we joked about the managing attorney at Mara Swazi, the former managing attorney, how I would love to do anything to annoy her. Like, and so I'm like, how do I get my favorite things into an article? I wrote an Aerosmith article and tied 401k plans. So how can I do that? So I love the fact that I could, do the good, the bad, and the ugly, the Sergio Leone movies, even though my favorite Sergio Leone movie is Once Upon a Time in the West. I finally, it was always for a few dollars more, and now it's Once Upon a Time in the West. But
There you go.
let's get to the topic about AI. But AI is a good tool, and sometimes it's not so good, not such a good tool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's the, again, and I am probably the least technologically advanced person on this panel in terms of I still write things down on a pad. But the idea being is it's like anything else. It's how it gets manipulated in terms of people are like, oh, it's going to replace advisors, and people are just going to, push a button and ask whatever, Claude or Chat GPT or whatever one it is, the Copilot, and all the answers are going to be there. Yeah, until someone gets in and manipulates all the information, and then now you're heading down the wrong path. I think there was a LinkedIn post, Eileen Forenza or one of the someone had posted the other day where there was a plan that had followed along, and she like put it into and now the IRS is like, yeah, no, that's not how it works. And she's like, oh, but I but I put it into wherever and I found it, and it's like, yeah. So until there's some more controls in terms of how it works. I mean, it's great to help with writing and rephrasing things, but the idea of replacing people, I just don't see it.
Yeah, in terms of AI mistakes that we've had, you could Google it, and there have been like litigators, not arrest litigators, but just litigators with appellate work and doing briefs. And they obviously use Chat GPT or whatever for cases because they cited cases that did not exist.
Yeah,
They submit it to the court, and as with anything, you do research and you turn out that these cases didn't exist. And that's
in the Fourth Circuit.
It's pretty
In the Fourth Circuit, you have to add now the last page on your brief. You have to certify that in fact that it was not. I mean, you can use it like through systems that are developed, but you have to certify that this was not written by some Claude or again Paston or whatever. Yeah, they literally have to certify that they didn't use AI to write it in the Fourth Circuit now.
And forget about
All right,
I'm sorry, the Sergio Leone movies. I'm more spooked out about Terminator 2. That this is going to be the Chat GPT is going to be Cyberdyne, and we're going to get Judgment Day as a result of that.
we just released our annual participant pulse survey, and I'm going to share my screen if I have that capability here, if I can do it here. So I think that's showing up, right?
Yep.
So,
Yes.
Participants generally trust AI with investment decisions in varying degrees. So, there is a trust, there is an acceptance of it by participants in 401k plans, Ari, but it's in conjunction with human involvement.
Right. Yeah.
So you could see on the top left, across different functions, 75 to 80% of participants generally trust AI, either fully or when combined with human input. People trust AI more than they do a relative. You don't want to go call your uncle, Tony in Brooklyn for investment advice, so they'll lean more towards AI for that. But they definitely want human involvement, and it depends on the function. If it's rebalancing, setting up a withdrawal program, setting up a contribution rate, you could see some of the numbers fluctuate based on the level of involvement with AI. So we did a full study on this. So it is becoming more and more of a thing, the younger generation, and it's only going to exponentially increase from here, about the level of trust and involvement in AI as the record keepers, the asset managers, the financial advisory firms start to adopt it. And, to James's point, it's not going to replace people. Over our careers, we've heard so many times how we're getting replaced. The internet is going to replace us, and it hasn't, but those who don't use the technology will be replaced. But you have to adopt it, use it, have it be part of your practice and your educational efforts.
Yeah.
One place I think it's really good actually is because this is the good, the bad, and the ugly, um, is style stuff. You know, it's not very good on currency, it's not very good on legal stuff, but style stuff, like if I take something, and this happens a lot, I get something from some record keeper, it's a communication that's impossible for a participant to ever understand. I'll throw it into an AI thing and say, hey, take this communication uh, and rewrite it as if the audience was a fifth grader.
Yeah.
There it does pretty good, I would
Yeah.
say. Sometimes it gets some inaccuracies in the translation, but that's why you have a human looking at it, you know? But I think it does a really good job of that because yes, I could rewrite this ridiculous vendor's, 40-page document into a 3-page document that it really needs to be for a participant, but that's going to take me days, you know? So why not just throw it into my AI and see what comes up, see what it comes up with. So I think that's a good part of the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mike. We've done the same thing. We've done the same thing, and it does, from a communication standpoint, help a lot. So, yeah. But again, but to Bill's point though, is again from a fact checking again, you have to, it's like Wikipedia on steroids. So if you don't do something, you're gonna find yourself in trouble. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I find it helps me with writing. Like, for example, it's always been my biggest problem was what topics can I write about that I haven't written about it already? And it's just like, I'm like, and I'll tell ChatGPT, what are planned sponsor ideas going on right now? And it just helps and cuts down on the writer's block because I would spend all day coming up with 5 or 6 blog posts. And now it's like, I don't spend all day with it because it gives me the ideas of what I need. But like I said, it's got its limitations. I remember one time talking about it right after the death of Rob Reiner, which to me really was a terrible thing because I was supposed to meet Rob at an event last September, but he canceled. I think it was right after the Charlie Kirk thing, and ChatGPT's like, him and his wife are alive, and it was like a weird like thing.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't murdered.
Yeah.
It's got its limitations, and that's with any tool that we've ever had in the retirement plan services area. It's no different. The website. When we had that first website, I remember at CBiz, all it could do was spit out. But if it didn't crash, all it would do is spit out your account balance by source. And then over time it develops. But it's like with anything, it's a tool. And
Yeah.
that's all really it is. It's not going to replace us. There's always going to be a need for human, verification.
Currency and current events is an example of the bad and sometimes ugly, definitely. It's the reason it does that, Ari, is it's searching all of the
Right.
universe. So like,
Right.
so like 90% of the thing's gonna say Rob Reiner is alive, and only the 10% of because it's old, and only the current stuff is gonna tell that. A good test of it every year, and I actually do this every year to see how if it gets a little better is as soon as the retirement plan limits for the next year are announced, I type it in. What's the new limit? And it never gets it right. It always gives the prior year limits. But, then I type it in a week later and it gets a little better with some prompting. And then now, we're in January, probably by now it gets it right. But it's very tough on recent current events because it's looking at the whole history of things. It doesn't discern an old fact as from a new fact as well. And that's why it trips up on a lot on people who've recently died. And it's not just Rob, of course, but anybody who's recently died.
Yeah, I think it's good in the sense that it does create an efficiency, and the problem with any efficiency, people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
that's what's going to be the fallout. But that's with any business over the years.
And a lot of people just don't use it right. Like you've got to keep prompting it. I remember asking it a question about a certain type of litigation, and I knew some of the cases that fell into that category, and it would spit out cases, and it wouldn't include the cases that I knew were part of that category. So I would then prompt it, "What about this case?"
Okay.
And it'll go, you're right, Mike. There's about this and this. But you got to keep prompting it to get the right answer. And some people they want everything immediate, in today's world, and I don't blame them. they stop at question one. They don't do that prompting of, hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? To ultimately get the right answer. And also, a lot of people don't look at the sources. Like a
No.
lot of times when you pose a question to AI, it's going to give you a bunch of sources. Some of those sources, if you actually look at them, actually contradict what the AI bot said. And the sources are usually better than the answer you get from AI. So when I'm using it a lot, I'll like probably ignore the answer I got from the AI bot, but I'll click on that source and read those articles that, credit to AI, I might not have found on my own and doing
Yeah.
my own research, or it would have taken me a lot longer.
Yeah.
Okay. Next topic. Who's going to arrive first? Godot or a future final fiduciary rule? Now, this has been going on how many years? This fiduciary rule, the next final fiduciary rule. Son of
Not the
fiduciary
only geek who
rule.
knows about Waiting for Godot.
Wait, yeah, you can explain Waiting for Godot.
Waiting for Godot is a play
Of
where the
course, I
whole play,
mispronounced it. Yeah.
Samuel Beckett, right, Mike?
Yes.
Samuel Beckett, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a play about anticipation. It's like waiting for a person who never comes, who never shows up, but it's all about the anticipation of the person when you show up, and that's why I kind of equate with having a final fiduciary rule, because we've been teased a lot over the years. Like we've had ones that have been final, we've had the ones that have been final and effective, but we've never gotten to final effective and implemented.
Final effective. Yeah, that's a pretty good way of describing it. It's always,
And that's and Mike, that I mean that isn't that half the joke? Exactly.
yeah,
It's finalized, but there's still four more steps before everything. Well, all right, well then what are we talking about? Exactly. And
Oh,
and it all goes back to the same thing in terms of, yeah, do we really need it? And I always joked, I'm like, you don't, because if you draw the line, then people start playing around with the whole word. And then, like, 10 years ago, if you would have said fiduciary, half the advisors on the planet would have been like, what are you talking about? And now everyone massages it to whatever argument that they want to make. So at the end of the day, what is the final rule going to say? That it's the way they look at it. Well, you have to do it. Putting the client first. Well, you want to be successful in this business. That's what you have to do anyway. Okay. So, I mean, and again, I know we're oversimplifying it, but the idea that somehow this rule is going to crystallize finally, and all of a sudden everything's going to be right. It's going to be, it's the AI, it's the AI of rules that's going to change everything. And now all of a sudden, the whole
yeah,
industry
I
is going
mean,
to
God
be
bless
better.
Fred Reish, but when they had the last rule, I mean, he did like 80 articles on it or something, like every week, like an example of the best interest rule. And I'm like, God bless that man. And and it's like people ask me all the time, why didn't you write about the fiduciary? I'm like, until it passes, until it's implemented, it's of no, I don't like to talk about hypotheticals. And everything's been like a hypothetical. I remember getting hired by an insurance company in 2016 when Obama was president, and that final rule was going to be implemented. And this insurance company was so crazy that they were jettisoning SEP IRA business uh, with the idea that SEP IRAs fall under ERISA, even though SEP and SIPLs, and even though they really don't, if it's owner only. But they couldn't cherry pick what was owner only and what was, and there's still a question of whether a SEP or a simple with employees is an ERISA plan. I think that it is because it's got employees, but they were getting rid of their business left and right. And I think right after the election, because everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Right after the election, Trump wins. I think within a week they said, Ari, your work here is done. They knew that was going to be.
Yeah.
I was helping them, and they're like, you know what, we're done here. We're out of business. It's going to get withdrawn. And I'm like, are you sure about it? And they knew.
so
yeah. And what?
there's been a
Sorry.
few pieces of legislation and a few regulations that have fundamentally changed the landscape of 401k plans and the people that work in this field. Auto enroll,
Yeah.
certainly one of the most influential or impactful things that ever occurred. ERISA 408(b)(2) fee disclosure, certainly one of the most impactful. But the fiduciary rule, I mean, remember, the original was 1975, the five-part test, hadn't been touched in, 45 years or whatever it is. And then in 2012 or 2014, whatever maybe it's 2016, the Obama administration proposed a fiduciary rule. And what that did, to your point about people getting scared and reacting, getting out of SEP IRAs, all the broker dealers out there and a lot of the wires said, "Holy cow! If our advisors are going to have to be fiduciaries, they can be held liable. If they can be held liable, we're going to be held liable." So all of a sudden, distribution from to the advisors changed from dealing with the advisor to dealing with the home offices because distribution became more top down. A lot of these firms put in controls and bumpers and guardrails around their advisors. You saw firms say, if you're going to do 401ks, you have to be credentialed. If you're going to be a fiduciary, you have to demonstrate that you have knowledge. So Morgan Stanley came out with the CRD, the Corporate Retirement Director. UBS came out with the RPC. Merrill Lynch came out with the RBC and the RAFA and all these designations. And if you didn't have them, you had to partner with an advisor that could, quote unquote, be a fiduciary. Before that, if you needed an advisor to be a fiduciary, you had to sign up Morningstar, Wilshire, Envestnet, Mesirow, and then along came Leaf House and disrupted that whole thing with their fees. So this has been very impactful in terms of advisor behavior, firm behavior. I think it's been great, even though it's never made it across the finish line. Because to your point, James, do the right thing by the client. That should be a no-brainer. It should be, but we all know in many cases it isn't.
No.
So I think, so Obama proposed it, Trump rescinded it, Biden proposed it, and you can say maybe the DOL went too far with overreach into IRAs and rollovers and annuities, and now it's killed again. So it's become this political ping pong ball, much like ESG, where depending on the administration, you're going to get a different flavor. At some point, both sides are going to have to put their heads together, come up with something that's acceptable and neutral, or just give up on it and stick with the 1975 five-part test. So,
No, but that, I mean, that's the whole point is why do you, it's like a looming threat that sits out there. It's like, all right, and it's the people guess, and just like AI gets manipulated, there's always going to be bad actors. I mean, that's
yeah.
life. You can't
But I agree with you. It shouldn't be viewed as a threat. What's wrong with doing the right
doing
thing?
the right thing, exactly. Why is it if you just put it in place, like auto enrollment? Oh my God, that's going to be like the worst thing ever. All my employees are going to quit if I force. No, they're not. They're all going to stay in the plan.
And that's a funny story. That's how I met James in 2010 on LinkedIn, because I was one of those guys and James was one of those guys. Like, you know what, this business has got to change because with the fees and whatnot. And we were, there's this one guy who wasn't even in the business. He was just like, "Oh, you're just selling fear, no, Sue, you're just selling stuff." And I'm like, guys, it's going to change because when you require a plan sponsor a fiduciary responsibility to pay reasonable fees and he has no idea what he's paying, something's got to give.
Got to give. Yeah.
And for the advisors that say that are, oh, my plan's too small, it won't get sued. Yeah, they're probably right. But what gets plans sued in the large plan market will cause advisors to lose plans in the small plan market.
Right.
So if you're not adhering to what's going on out there, just because you won't get sued, that shouldn't give you comfort. If you're not making sure of all these steps, they're not going to be a client of yours for long because somebody like Mike, somebody like James is going to come in and say, you're not doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I use this as an example. My running joke is you can't get a plan sponsor pay for anything. And I do this retirement plan and review, the tune up for like the last 16 years. And I maybe done 10 of them in 16 years. And I'll never forget pre-fee disclosure being hired by a firm, a medical practice, $14 million plan. The advisor was getting paid 60 basis points, which was still a heck of a lot of money, even though that's a heck of a lot of money now. It's a heck of a lot of money even in those days. He was a broker. And I'm like, do you talk to him? And apparently he might have been related to one of the doctors or he knew one of the doctors, never showed up, getting paid 84 grand a year. And I said, do you have any materials, any investment education, minutes, fiduciary review? They had nothing. So what'd they do? They hired a 338 for less than half and voila, the guy lost his business. So it's not just about getting sued. It's about, being a plan provider and protecting your spot. Because I've always joked, you're an advisor, 100 people want your seat at the table. It's a
Oh no, yeah,
competitive business.
exactly. No, and that, yeah, and that's that's the whole thing. Is again, uh, like Bill said. I mean, it's been what 50 years since they wrote the law. I mean, it's not that hard.
Right.
Speed limit's 55. Drive 55. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
drive. You know?
That basis point thing has always been hysterical for me. I mean, there's some advisors out there who are still making tons of money on business they sold in the 80s
Oh
because
yeah, yeah,
of how sticky it is. Acid Trail, is just like, oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah.
And I'd love, I mean, yeah, we could do a whole other subject on that, so I won't go there. But I will say on this subject, I think Bill made a really good point. Just the threat, and I haven't looked at it this way because I'm always making the joke about waiting for the fiduciary rule and waiting for Godot. But just the threat of the fiduciary rule, I think it has had a lot of positive impact, like Bill has said. Another thing I would mention is the asset rating. I definitely think the asset rating has gone down where, you know, people would constantly call people with high balances and retirement plans where their money was probably better off anyway and try to get them to move to something that was, double the cost of their high balance. We used to get, our firm used to get flooded with calls from like wirehouses who used to do that. And people wouldn't they wouldn't even, they allegedly had a suitability standard, but I don't even think they followed that all that much. But I've seen that business has dried up, I think, pretty significantly. Unless someone has a differing opinion, I just haven't seen as many
Oh no, yeah, yeah,
calls on that.
100%, yeah, 100%. Because now that again, because now you can't. I mean, like you said, the fees, the compression has been so dramatic that where are they going to get? And some of the BDs are worried about it, so now they have a special rollover program. And now, wait a second, if they're paying 25 basis points on the 401k and you're going to charge 50, now what's going to happen? And so I think there's a lot of concern, and it's just not worth the potential issue down the road, Mike. I agree. Yeah.
My favorite time of the year was end of the year with the gifts that they'd give our advisors. The back in the day when the fund companies had unlimited budgets. And I never forget one fund company, and it was not one that Bill ever worked for, but I'll never forget it. It was a female DCIO for New York, and she asked one of our Fit Review guys, "What can I gift? What can I get you?" And he actually says a set of golf clubs. And needless to say, she did not provide him with the golf clubs. But I remember those. I remember those days with the nice gifts or whatever. The food. And Rich would share. Rich Loretta was good with like that. But yeah, it's always a changing business. So speaking of change, let's get to the next topic because we only have like 25 minutes. Alternative investments and retirement plans, an actual thing or just the latest shiny object? And then I just want to add, Bitcoin, is that the worst idea for 401k plans since Caddyshack 2?
Since Caddyshack 2, I don't know. That's again.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, Caddyshack 2.
But it almost goes back to the fiduciary rule and all the other things you talk about. Every time, and PEPs and MEPs and METs and every time there's a new thing, everyone's gonna jump. And you see the survey. 50% of plan participants want access to alternative investments. Okay, take that 50% and ask them what an alternative investment is. 100% can't tell you. They don't know what it is. But
different.
They
I want
see it
different.
somewhere, and they're like, "Oh wait, let me. This is great. I have to have it." And again, it's the whole idea that somehow there's some magic wand or something that's going to appear that's going to make everything better. And Bill would probably know better than all of us. Half the companies that make up part of the funds are probably already invested in some of the stuff anyway. So it's not like it's not there. It's just a matter of yeah, do I want a participant, calling Mike and saying, can I put 20% in Ethereum and 15% in something? No, because they don't have any idea, but it's not like they haven't been exposed to it.
Yeah. I find this one particularly hilarious because plan sponsors right now are getting sued over doing forfeiture accounts the right way. Yeah, in accordance with their plan document. Can you imagine if we unleash you know, if we go full force on like crypto and things like that in 401k, we'll be keeping plaintiffs' attorney busy for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
mean,
my thoughts on this are, to James's point, this is not a new shiny object at all.
Yeah,
Private markets, and let me be clear, when I say private markets, I'm not talking about private equity. That's part of it, but everybody
right,
immediately hears private markets and they latch on to private equity. It's so much more than that. It's private real estate, it's private credit, it's infrastructure. So yes, there's crypto. Now, my 30 seconds on crypto or Bitcoin specifically, yes, there's benefits with the blockchain and everything else, but under ERISA, an investment has to be deemed to be a prudent long-term investment. Crypto has only had regulatory oversight by the SEC for 4 years and 3 months.
yeah,
So I don't think we're at that place yet where we can say it's a prudent long-term investment. Maybe we will be, but after 4 years of regulatory oversight since the first Bitcoin ETF was launched, I don't think it, and that's just my opinion. I'm not an ERISA attorney like somebody on the screen here, but I don't think it meets that prudent long-term investment yet. But as far as private markets goes, there's been private real estate in plans for over 30 years. Principal has the U.S. Property Fund, private real estate. If you look at your stable value funds and some of your bond funds, to James's point, guess what? There's private credit in those things. You just don't know it, but it's there. But there's even some non-listed stocks in some of your equity mutual funds. So it's always been part of it. It's 20% of assets in the UK and Australia's defined contribution systems. The statistics on private equity are 80% of the companies that generate over 100 million in revenue are private. And the number of publicly listed companies has shrunk dramatically over the past decade. So what the industry is advocating for is access for the average participant. But to use Mike's words, we're not looking to unleash this. It's if you look at the executive order, and whether you love the president or hate the president, whenever the president of the United States issues an executive order around 401k plans, your clients are going to have questions. As advisors, you need to be ready to answer them because, hey, the president just said this. What does it mean? Don't worry about that. That can't be your answer. So when you look at private markets, as a fiduciary, as an advisor, your question simply should be, can this possibly be additive to participant outcomes? If you land on no, turn the page and move on. If you land on yes or maybe, it warrants further investigation. But no one is saying we should put this in plans for participants to choose. If you go through the executive order, it says as part of a managed solution, i.e. a target date fund, a custom target date fund, or a managed account. So we're talking about a 5 to 10% allocation in a professionally managed portfolio. So nobody is selecting the XYZ private equity, private real estate, private credit fund in and of itself. It's embedded as part of a managed solution, and that helps with the liquidity provisions. We can get into the daily val situations. It varies by asset class, but this is going to become a thing. It's just a matter of how widely adopted it is. In the institutional space, there are plans that are doing this already. I could tell you because we have secured some significant mandates in the private real estate space with multi-billion-dollar plans. This will come down market. It's just a matter of how quickly and the acceptance rate. But when it does, it's going to be part of a managed account or a target date, not a standalone option.
yeah. I think the executive order, it's it's kind of the wrong framework for what's going to probably happen in the marketplace.
Mhm.
Just because the executive order, I think, was just kind of a let's throw a bunch of things in here, let's see it'll stick. I mean, do we see tontines becoming popular in
No.
retirement and in 401k plans? If you do, I mean, feel free to express that opinion. I don't see tontines get.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different things in there, and there's very different conversations, tontines aside. But there's a very different conversation with a plan sponsor about crypto versus private assets or
Right.
even private equity or retirement income, which I think is also in there.
Yeah, it is.
besides the teams. Yeah. So like I think those are very, very different conversations that all happen to get stacked into this executive order.
Yeah.
My
And
concern
but
more is like the marketplace is getting more towards like, you know, the, the the service providers out there are getting, are starting to get this taste for crypto. And I think once you get that taste for crypto, you probably don't go back and reverse it.
Right.
yeah,
And
well,
Artie's written about this,
yeah.
about
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
crypto.
listen, I think again, the 401k plan business, it's always predicated that we've decided that the least informed people should make the investments decisions in the plan, which are the plan participants. And plan participants, it's I just always think of my mother with her investments, whatever, and she's actually good in the sense that she one of the few times in life she actually listened to me. But plan participants have bad behavior, chasing returns. And so when, Bitcoin was 127,000 or whatever it is, I'm sure people were like, "Oh wow, look at was," and they wrote it all the way down to 80 something and they sold. They lock in their losses. They absolutely poor behavior. And so that's why I always think that, yeah, for me, outside investment, it's great because I'm stubborn and, I'm a Taurus and I'm, just stubborn and I'll write it all the way down back to 11 when I originally bought it. That's the way I am. But participants don't have that kind of behavior. And I could see Bitcoin as Bill would point out, as part of a sleeve to a managed account, probably that would give people some exposure and make them happy. But if you're gonna have like Fidelity and For Us All offering people, I don't even know. I think they have a window, not they're limiting to how much people can invest. It's just a weapon of mass destruction in the sense that, people could certainly wipe out their losses. And it always reminds me of the participant when I was at Myers Swazi, the one of the office guys. Ari, I put in all my money 100% in the mid cap fund because that's the middle of the market. And I'm like, okay, that's not really what a mid cap fund is, but maybe you should go with a target date fund. I don't know, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next topic. HSAs, the Rodney Dangerfield of retirement savings, because as we know, Rodney Dangerfield didn't get any respect.
I love
When are
yeah.
advisors going to learn about this stuff?
Well, listen, they're fantastic. I mean, you have to have a high deductible health plan to be able to have an HSA. It's a Roth with a deduction is what it amounts to. You get a tax deduction, you get tax-free growth, and you get to withdraw the money tax-free. There's all different types of strategies with them. The general line of thinking out there is you contribute to your 401k up to the employer's match. Then you contribute to your HSA till you max that out, and then you go back to your 401k. They're that powerful. So, unless you're getting free money from your employer, you should do the HSA. There's another neat strategy with them that you can use with adult children that can't be claimed as a dependent. So, if you have, and I'll tell you full disclosure, we did this with our daughter. My daughter was 23, graduated college. She's on mom and dad's insurance until she's 26. She got a full-time job. We told her, don't take the health insurance at work. You're covered under mom and dad's plan. Check the box. Benefit number one. She saves money on health insurance because she's covered. But once we stopped claiming her as a dependent, she can't use our HSA dollars. Your HSA dollars are only for your spouse, yourself, and your dependents. So here's my daughter, 23 years old, covered under a high deductible plan, but no access to HSA dollars. So the code allows her to contribute to an HSA on her own. But because she's covered under a family plan, she can contribute the family rate. So here you have a 23-year-old that can contribute at the time $7,400. She wasn't in a position to afford it. So mom and dad gifted her the $7,400 because it's under the gift tax rules and said, you are not to spend this money ever, and we opened an account at the Fidelity branch, HSA, this gifted the 7,400. She got the tax deduction on that because then she put it into the HSA. So it lowered her taxable income 74, and now she grows that money for 40 years. And we did that when she was 23, 24, 25, and 26. So It's
You
a
know, Bill, you should be
phenomenal
one of those. You
mechanism.
should be one of those guys on PBS. What's that? Ed Slott with the IRA should do
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
It's
But
fantastic.
it's a phenomenal way for anybody to get tax-free growth,
Right.
tax-free withdrawals, and a deduction. And there's the shoebox rule saying, well, if you keep your receipts, you can pull money out in 30 years for expenses you had today. Well, trust me, I'm pushing 60. By the time I'm 70, I'm going to have so many health related expenses. I'm not going to need to reach back into a shoebox, to get receipts. And you can pay your Medicare premiums out of HSA. So you have access to this money tax free. So you can withdraw it, and control your spending, control when Social Security becomes taxable by utilizing this bucket of money. So if you're an advisor out there and you're not familiar with them, get familiar with them. Yes, it's probably something you can't get paid on, but if somebody else is talking to your plan sponsors about it and you're not, they're going to look up here and you're going to look here. It's a consulting opportunity. It builds that moat around the client for you and doesn't give access to somebody else. That's my rant.
Yeah, I do want to tie Rodney Dangerfield to the last comment about Caddyshack 2. And then Rodney Dangerfield not only did not get respect, he was one of the smartest people in the room when he refused to do Caddyshack 2. And all they essentially did after that was do a remake of Caddyshack with Jackie Mason in the Rodney role, and it was just awful. So I just wanted to point that out
Yeah,
there.
I have never. True fact. I've tried to watch Caddyshack 2.
never.
I have never made it through the
I
whole
saw it
thing.
in the theaters, and that's
Never
in
made
90
it.
minutes of my life I'll never get back. And literally, I did not laugh once until the end when Chevy was with Dan Aykroyd and they made one joke about,
Oh, so I've got to watch the end. You're
They had-
saying because I
Right.
never made it.
Watch the last 2 minutes, Mike. Exactly.
yeah, last 2 minutes, it was like it was something to do with an arrow, and Chevy asked the question, which was funny, and that is the only funny line in the movie.
Yeah, no, that literally has to be top three like worst sequels ever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of, and why would
Yeah.
the whole thing is why would you? I mean, who's sitting saying there's a follow up to this?
And
There's no
Harold
follow-up.
Ramis,
What are you
Harold
following
Ramis
up?
may rest his peace. Harold Ramis was a comedy legend. He wrote Caddyshack and he directed it. And he also co-wrote Animal House. And he should have begged his name off of it. He's like, this is a bad idea. Let us not do it. Let the movie die. And Jackie Mason is going to be the next Rodney.
James, you didn't think there was a lot of unresolved issues in the original Caddyshack that needed to be resolved in a sequel?
And there's no Ted Knight. I mean, because he passed away, and Ted was like, I mean, Robert Stack was great for Unsolved Mysteries with the trench coat, and obviously Airplane and The Untouchable.
Yeah. As much as I love Rodney, and I am a Rodney super fan, I think Ted Knight. I actually argue that Ted Knight's the funniest character.
Well, he is, and that's that whole Bob Newhart, that type of comedy is like only so many people can pull it off, and that's where people don't. You can't. There's no second Ted Knight. That doesn't happen.
When he does that, well, we're waiting. That just gets me every time.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many Ted Knight funny, just bits where I sent people younger to you to the gas chamber. I had to do it, and I owed it to them. That kind of stuff, or you will have nothing and like it. To his grandson, and he played such a great character that Rodney could just play off of it. I mean, I always do the line with a hat like that. You should come for a free bowl of soup. And then later is, "Hey Whitey, where's your hat?" And I love using that line too. But the best lines are Rodney, but Ted Knight is an integral part of the movie. I mean, he's just so like stuck, and just like you could play off of him. Well, how do you measure yourself against other golfers? He asks Ty Webb, because Ty doesn't keep score. I measure him by height. I'm no slouch myself. Judge, you're a tremendous slouch. Don't sell yourself short. You're a tremendous slouch. And that is, you need a straight guy like that to carry it, to knock off. And Robert Stack's a great actor, but there was a reason they used him in Airplane, because he's like very deadpan, and it's just not in a satire that works. In a true comedy, it doesn't work. So we got a couple minutes. I just want to get the last thing Um, and of course, I deleted the question. It's going to be with 403. Oh, well, I still actually think I have it. 403B. No, what was it?
In-plan annuities.
In-plan annuities. Is that something that we should be having? 403B plans, 401k plans?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we've had them for years we've had them for decades in
Right.
403B plans, and no one uses them. Like literally, we have what are called accumulation annuities in 403B
Right.
in a lot of 403B plans, where literally someone's paying for an annuity benefit. They're pre-funding an annuity benefit that they get. And it's one of the more like a lot of them, they're buying an annuity benefit that's extremely favorable to them. You know, you say what you want about annuities, but they paid for that benefit. And only about, I think the stat is only about less than a quarter of people who have those accumulation annuities actually annuitize their benefit. Most people roll it over out of the plan or take this other distributions that are not annuities. So we have literally people in 403B plans who are lighting money on fire rather than taking annuity benefit. They're literally taking that money and lighting it on fire. So why do we think in 401k plans that in-plan annuities are going to be like the greatest thing since sliced bread when we have decades of experience of people buying annuities and then not actually using the annuity benefit?
Well, that's government for you, pushing an idea. And again, government doesn't know how people work. Government doesn't know how retirement plans work. And yeah, I understand the retirement crisis in the country and people not having enough money. The problem, I love, and we have one of the annuity, sponsors the events. It's a great idea. The problem is fiduciary concerns. I don't like I don't like the volunteer. I hate when I get volunteered to do things. Well, Ari, you should do this, whatever. Well, I mean, that's what marriage is for, I guess, sometimes I'm asked to do things. But I hate volunteering people. I don't like to volunteer plan sponsors. Oh, here's something else you have to do. You're going to have to vet the annuities that you're going to offer in the plan. And annuities have a bad name. Why? Because it's an insurance-based product, and insurance-based products have had a bad name for years and years because the cost. That's it.
James, anything
Yeah,
on this?
again, this is going back to all the stuff we're talking about, in terms of the alts and everything. In terms of an option, the HSA is a great fit for some people. But if you don't have a high deductible plan and you're living paycheck to paycheck, guess what? It's not a good option for you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the annuity, if it fits to the model in terms of your plan, great. But like Mike said, I mean, it's been available. No one's explained it. So why now all of a sudden is this going to be
Yeah.
okay? Wait, now I understand. So it's
So
just
Yeah.
it's very participant specific. That's all.
yeah, the why
The
now. I
broad
mean,
approach.
if you look, and Mike's spot on. I mean, the original name for 403B is tax sheltered annuities. That's the only thing you can invest in up until the mid 80s when they allowed mutual funds in was annuities. So, and there's been a very low conversion rate to annuitize. So, why 401ks? Well, you've had a group of academics preaching to make 401ks more like DBs. That everybody, the good old days, everybody had a DB, which is a complete fallacy. Only about, according to Nevin Adams, only about 17% of workers in the private sector actually cashed a DB check. Because if you changed jobs, if you didn't work, they would let you go. So I quote Billy Joel, the good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems, from keeping the faith.
Right.
But the whole concept around retirement income is completely necessary. People need retirement income. But in all the education meetings I've done, nobody has come up to me afterwards and said, Bill, what I really need is a way to get $211 a month for the rest of my life.
Wow.
They all say, I don't want to go to zero. I don't want to lose it all. So everybody has guaranteed income through Social Security, but can everybody else use another form of income? Yes, of course. We've done a great job as an industry preparing people to retire. Accumulation. How much will you need? What's your number? The commercials with the couple walking through the vineyard or out on the sailboat. But when they reach the top and they've, ready to retire and they have all this money that they've saved up, they're like the fish at the end of Finding Nemo when they get out of the dentist's office. They're in the plastic bags in the water and they look at each other and go, now what?
Now what?
People don't know what to do, when they retire, how to decumulate. I had an advisor in Westchester ask me several years ago, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, what should be your goal? And I got it right. Most people will say to get to the top,
No, get
but
back
the
down.
right answer is to
It's
get
about
to the bottom.
right.
And more people die on the way down Mount Everest than on the way up because everybody prepares for the climb up, not for the climb down. And that's where we are as an industry with participants. We need to get people to learn how to decumulate. This retirement income, people with two commas in their 401k, they're going to work with their individual advisor on an annuity that makes sense for them with the riders and features that are right for them. People with 75,000 in their 401k, what's an annuity going to do for them? Nothing. So this middle pack could benefit. But how many of them want to stay in their employer's plan for the rest of their lives? How many employers want to keep them in plan for the rest of their lives? And how many advisors want potential clients in those plans for the rest of their lives? So the funnel gets narrower and narrower. Yes, it could have benefit, but here's the where this could really take off. There's industry lobbyists, you can connect the dots to see who it is. They want to make this a mandatory feature in plans, that every plan will be mandated to have an in-plan annuity feature to make them more like DBs. If that happens, and I'm not betting against it, but if it does happen, this will be very successful for people in the 403B space, that will have access to this. Whether or not they turn the switch on and annuitize remains to be seen. So a lot of work to be done helping the American worker come down the mountain.
Yeah, but that's
This
the
is
whole
part
point.
of it.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, Bill. Is you talked about the commercial exactly. The guy in the vineyard and on the boat, he's got like 8 people helping him. He doesn't need it's the person. It's the person doesn't even know where the boat is or the vineyard
Right.
is who needs to figure out what they're doing, and that's
Yeah.
the folks not getting it. No, you're 100% correct there. So,
Okay, so I think we're done about now. It's almost 1 o'clock, and Bill's got a presentation.
and apparently he also has led us to the next one, which will apparently be 80s rock music. Apparently will be the theme, since we'll build off the Billy Joel comment.
No, I like the mountain thing. I think that's
Well,
eye-opening. This is the most eye-opening thing I heard since when I asked Drew Brees about the Chargers getting rid of him, and he said to me, "It all in the end, it all worked out." I'm like, "Wow, that's really a deep thought." I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. That thing about the mountain is going to stay with me.
there you
Yeah.
go.
I have to work that into an article.
Well, I saw the opening comments earlier, everything is stolen. I got that from Barry Mitchell in Westchester County, New York, with Next
There you
Level
go.
Financial. He's the one
There
that
you go,
gave me
Barry.
that line. So if we have to footnote it and
Well,
there's copyrights on it.
Somebody in this panel, I don't want to name their names, but they gave me the great line about fiduciary warranties. If an insurance company insures you and doesn't charge you, of what use is it? I mean, they obviously, they
Yeah.
insure
Yep.
risk money and they give you something for free. What are they trying to say about it? So,
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right.
okay,
Cool.
cool.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
This was
Thanks, guys.
always a blast.
Appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bill, take it away.
All
Invesco.
right. Well, thank you, Ari. Thanks, James and Mike. Great seeing you guys. All right. So, listen, I've worked with Ari for years, collaborating with him, helping clients. He's been fantastic to work with over, the period of the 2 decades plus that I've known him. And I'm happy and honored to be a part of this conference every year. For those of you that are back here and remember last year, I went through the anatomy of a 5500. Where we ripped through a Department of Labor site and we went through a couple of 5500s. This year, I wanted to change it up a little bit because, we hear about advisors going in to meetings and having to justify their fee, justify their value. And it starts in the prospecting phase. I've been on closing calls where the plan sponsor will look across, when I was representing a record keeping, solution with Oppenheimer funds way back when, they would say, I understand what you do as the record keeper. They would look at the TPA. I understand what you do, but then they would look at the advisor and go, what do you do? And there were surprisingly advisors that had difficulty answering that question, and then they would say, well, how do you get paid? Oh, don't worry about, tell them what you get paid. You're worth every nickel of it. But be prepared to have a statement of services. If somebody asks you, what are you going to do? What value do you provide? Have that documented and slide it across the table for them. So again, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to walk you through a piece that we came up with here at Invesco called the Advisor Service Agreement. And I'm hoping everybody can see this. My screen is a little cluttered here, so um,
I see it.
it is coming up full. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So, you have the advisor service agreement, statement of services. So I'll walk you through this, but I'm also going to show, a prospecting letter that could be effective. But some of the key findings here on the cover page, and this is available. If anybody would like a copy of this, just send me an email, and we'll get you the PDF of this. My email address is William, even though I'm Bill, the formal is William. So WILLIAM .Schories, SCHORIES, William.Schories@Invesco.com, INVESCO. So again, SCHORIES is the spelling of the last name, and I'll be happy to get you the PDF of this. But when we look at a statement of services, this demonstrates your areas of expertise. It tells the plan sponsor exactly what services you're going to be providing. Now, here's some key stats, and this is from Fidelity, the Fidelity Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey. They interview over 1,000 plan sponsors, but 94% of plan sponsors work with a financial intermediary, sometimes called an advisor, sometimes called an institutional consultant, but 94% of plan sponsors need the help, need the professionalism, need the expertise of a professional in this space. Why? Because as you can hear from the earlier presentations and what we just discussed on the virtual bunch, ERISA can be complicated. It's why Ari has a full-time job. It's why I have a full-time job. It's a 50-year-old law, but there's always new provisions. It's always changing, fiduciary issues, litigation, legislation. There's a lot to keep up with. So that's why 94% of plans work with an advisor. Yet between one in five and 1 in 4, they're actively searching for a new advisor. Why? Well, for a variety of reasons. New advisors are bringing new things to the table, like the HSA, something like that, where, hey, how come our current guy didn't tell us about that? They want an advisor who was more effective in dealing with service issues. They want an advisor with better employee communications. This may be a plan that was sold 20 years ago, and the advisor has never made recommendations as the company has grown, or consolidated, and they didn't keep the plan to match the demographics or the needs of the plan sponsor. So these are all things advisors bring to the table. So in this piece that we're happy to share, there's a sample cover letter. I don't like this sample cover letter, so I'll tell you why in a second. It's fine in the aggregate, but there's one line in here that I want to have changed. And it starts right here where it says, Dear plan sponsor, as you know, sponsoring and maintaining a retirement plan that meets participant needs is a major responsibility involving many time-consuming tasks. I hate that language because if I told you, Ari, whenever I have to deal with you, it's time-consuming. Right?
Yeah.
What kind of messaging is that? So I want to change that. So don't use that even though it's here. So, I want it to be, maintaining a retirement plan that meets participant needs is a major responsibility involving many critical tasks. That's a little bit better. It's just the word time consuming got me. But managing fiduciary responsibility, monitoring and reviewing investments, compliance issues, improving the menu, proper and cost-effective plan administration. You could see the list goes on and on here. But this is why it's critical for you to have a statement of services, because I'll never forget that plan sponsor looking at the advisor in a closing call, and it was in Jericho, New York on Long Island. I won't say the advisor's name or the company name, but they looked at the advisor and said, what do you do? And the advisor couldn't answer the question. There was a lot of stammering and, I'll look at the investments for you on a quarterly basis. Okay, great. I can do that by going on to Morningstar. I don't need you to do that. So the failure to, communicate their value led to that advisor not winning the business. And they went with a different advisor. So it's critical. So going through here, you have to establish your qualifications. If you were listening to the virtual bunch earlier, we talked about the fiduciary rule, and this is where it became critical for advisors to communicate their qualifications. how do I know you're a prudent expert? ERISA says if I don't have the capabilities to do this, I have a responsibility to bring in a prudent expert to help guide me. What makes you a prudent expert? You're Series 7? Maybe you're only Series 6. Is that enough? Could be. Are you a CFA, a CFP? Do you have a SEMA designation? Are you credentialed in any of the retirement designations? Do you have a CRPS, a CRPC, an AIF? Are you accredited at your firm? How many other clients do you have that are 401ks or 403bs? Do you know the nuances of rollovers, of contributions, of Roth, the Roth catch-up, that we talked about? So you can see the complexities of this, of this business. What makes you qualified to talk about it? If you're not there yet, consider partnering with somebody at your firm who is. I'd rather have 50% of a piece of business than zero. So don't think you have to win all of this business on your own. You can partner with somebody. You can hire a third-party fiduciary. There are PEPs out there where you can hire a pooled plan provider to do a lot of this work. It doesn't mean your plan sponsor is no longer a fiduciary, but it means they've engaged with a prudent expert, and you could be there to educate the employees. Meanwhile, the PPP on a PEP or a third-party fiduciary will handle the investment aspect of it. So you don't have to be an expert at this, but if you do have credentials that would, point the way to that you do know what you're doing, put them on here and let them know. If you have references, always get permission first before you list any references, or just put available upon request and then notify the company, ask the company's permission. Do you mind if I put you down as a reference? The last thing you want to do is give somebody as a reference without asking permission. And then that client is like, hey, wait a minute, you're giving my name and number out to people we don't know? Not good. So always get permission, or just put available upon request. And then service philosophy. What will you be doing, as the provider, as the advisor on this? And there's a whole host of things. Consulting, HSAs, investment selection, cost efficiencies. You can see all of the full list here. Are you going to be fee-based, or are you going to take basis points? All right. There's no right or wrong here. But if you go fee-based, consider building in a COLA, a cost of living adjustment every year, so you don't have to continually go back to the client and ask for increases because your costs are going up. If you are going basis point driven, be prepared to negotiate those basis points lower as the assets continue to grow. Because with contributions and long-term market performance, it's not a straight line, but the trend in 401k assets has always been positive. Yes, you'll have some dips if there's a lot of distributions or the market is down, that'll outweigh the contributions in some years. But overall, over the long run, your compensation will go up if it's tied to plan assets. But are your services really tied to the amount of assets in the plan? I would argue no, because the fiduciary process on a $10 million plan is the same for a $5 million plan. It's the education, it's the monitoring and reviewing, that stays static. The number of employees might influence your fee, because if you have to get in front of a lot of employees, the frequency, the number of locations, if you're doing education, that can increase your costs. So definitely something to consider, whether you want to be fee-based or basis point. If you are fee-based, a flat fee, this is a great way, to make sure you're getting what you deserve, what you earn, what you're worth on smaller plans. You can have a minimum, like startup plans. Why would I want to do a startup plan? Because you have to sell them twice. One, that they should have a plan, and two, that they should do it with you. And then three, they've never done a plan before. So your phone's going to be ringing off the hook, or your inbox is going to be filled with emails because they're not familiar with discrimination testing and minimum coverage testing and top-heavy testing and loans and all this other stuff that they've never had to deal with before. So startups, a lot of work, not a lot of reward, especially if you're tied to basis points because there's no assets. So you can set a flat fee at a level that makes it worth your while. And any client not willing to pay it, well, your time is valuable. So if you set a minimum fee and they're not willing to pay it, don't be afraid to move on. But it's a very good way to build in that COLA and make sure you're getting what you deserve, especially at the small end of the market. If we go down here a little bit further, conversion and installation services. Some advisors bill separately for this. If you're going to go through and do an RFP process, to search for all different, right? This is additional work. So let's say they've been with provider A for 10 or 15 years, and now you want to see if it makes sense to switch providers. You're going to have to get proposals from 4 or 5 different vendors, go through the process of reviewing their proposals. Are there proprietary fund requirements that impact the fees, and all the different services, managed accounts, self-directed brokerage, auto IRA conversions, whatever it might be. You can bill separately for those if you want to. Some advisors just say, no, that's part of the deal. If I want to keep this plan, they're expecting that from me. I don't bill separately. But then ongoing, reviewing the investment policy statement, this is all stuff here too that you're going to continue to do on an annual basis. And then we get down to the calendar. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. And with all the different services that our advisors could be, and you don't have to offer all of these, so you can customize this and make it your own if there's certain things you would like to do, certain things you're not going to do. Like if a plan that you have is not going to have a self-directed brokerage account, don't include this, just take it out. Managed account reviews, great feature. Maybe your record keeper doesn't offer them. Maybe you don't want to offer them. Take it out. So all of this isn't mandatory, but it gives the plan sponsor an idea of what you're doing and how often they can expect to hear from you about it. So like an investment policy statement, once it's set, it's not exactly set it and forget it, but it's something that is set and should be reviewed at least annually. And I'll give you a specific example why. I remember a client not too long ago, their investment policy statement stated specifically that plan investments would be in mutual funds, right? Well, that's fine. And over the years, the plan grew and they moved 2 of their investments to a CIT structure, a collective investment trust. Well, they just violated their investment policy statement because the IPS only said mutual funds. Well, now they're in the CIT. They lowered the fees, for the participants. So from a fiduciary point of view, it was the right thing to do, but it violated the IPS. So they had to update the IPS to reflect mutual funds and collective investment trusts. Minor thing, but it's a reason why you want to keep this updated or at least give it a look periodically. But investment menu review, that's usually quarterly. Market and economic review, that's usually quarterly. QDIA, I would say semi-annual. This is where most of the assets are. So you want to do a deeper dive on this. You're going to review it as an investment, on a quarterly basis. But then on the QDIA side, you want to look at the glide path. That if it's a target date fund or if it's a risk-based fund, is it becoming more moderate and you expect it to be conservative? If it's a managed account, how are those looking? Same thing, then you go down in managed accounts and so on. ERISA 321, ERISA 338. Some firms don't allow their advisors to be 338. Some firms don't allow their advisors to be 321. And then you could go out and hire a Leaf House, a Morningstar, Mezro, Wilshire, Envestnet to be a third-party fiduciary. But if it's something you're doing, you have to determine, do you want to be a 321 or a 338? And what fee do you want to charge for that, if anything additional? Some advisors charge less for 338 services because they don't have to chase down plan sponsor signatures. They don't have to get their buy-in. They just have to make the decision and notify the plan sponsor about it. 321, it's a joint decision. So the plan sponsor has to agree to it. They have to sign off on it. And, there's a lot more work involved there. So these are all things that you have to consider, the timing of when you're in front of a plan sponsor. The other thing where this is helpful, I was in a meeting in New York City many years ago, and what we've done to ourselves as an industry is this whole race to zero. You have to be the lowest cost, got to save money, got to drive down expenses. That is a slippery slope. You never want your value add to be, I'm the lowest cost, because as soon as somebody is 1 basis point cheaper than you, you're gone. So if that's all your client recognizes you for, that you're low cost, you're doing yourself a disservice, and the client's not recognizing what you bring to the table as an advisor. So don't get into that game that I have to be cheaper. You state your fee for what your time is worth and you back it up convincingly. This is my fee and I'm worth it. Here's why. Now, the situation I was alluding to a few minutes ago was I was in New York City meeting with an advisor in his office, door closed. He's at his desk with his computer on. I'm sitting on the other side of the desk and his phone rings. And he said, Bill, excuse me, I have to take this. It's one of my clients. And I'm sitting there. So I hear the conversation. And the client is saying, they just got a proposal from another advisor who was 5 basis points lower. Could this advisor lower his fee 5 basis points? And to the advisor's credit, and I'll always remember this, he sat there with, like, I wasn't even in the room, and he said, can you hang on a second? I'm going to email you something. And he emailed a list of services he provided for that client. And he waited. He said, let me know when you get the email. Can you open a document? Go to page whatever it was, 4 or 5. And he said to the client, here's a list of everything I'm doing for you. Tell me which 2 or 3 items you no longer want me to do, and I'll lower my fee 5 basis points. And that ended the conversation. There was some back and forth a little bit, but that effectively ended it. The client said, oh, okay, we're good. And going back to the comment on the opening page here, which is what's critical, new advisor offered a strategy with more extensive services. Right there, bullet point number 1. The reason that's number 1, and it's not often the case, what's often the case is you were offering these services, but the client wasn't aware of it. They didn't know what you were doing. There was just somebody else that came in and said, look what I can do for you. Meanwhile, the current advisor was doing it, but they didn't communicate it. The client wasn't made aware of it. It was done behind the scenes with no communication to the client. That's why this checklist is valuable and critical, because the client understands and sees what you're doing, when you're doing it, and how often you're doing it. So, this just covers the investment consulting services, and you could see it's quite extensive. But then you have plan design services. You heard, we talked about the Roth catch-up. There's all new provisions out there. Safe harbor. How do you qualify for safe harbor? A QACA, an IACA, all these different acronyms and plan designs. Are you keeping the plan current to match what's going on at the company? A plan design put in 20 years ago might not make sense for the plan today. The company could have grown, it could have consolidated, and we talk about some of these things here, adding automatic enrollment, auto escalation, Roth, distribution options, vesting, and so on. So, RFP, we talked about benchmarking, plan committee review, minutes, audit assistance, education review, education seminars, enrollment meetings. If there's shift work, if there's different demographics, older workers' education is going to be different than younger workers' education. So there's a whole litany of topics that you need to cover. The other thing I want to, so I'll pause there for a second, just A, to catch my breath, and B, just to let that sink in for a minute. But again, we can get this out to anybody that would like it. So Ari, if you're on, I don't know if you want to ask a question or make a comment while I pause for 10 seconds here.
Well, I'm still here.
Okay, excellent.
I agree what you said. I kind of like I like that advisor with the 5 basis points, because there's ultimately, like, I was surprised it went that way, and he could have just said, you know what, I thought he was going to send back an email, you're fired. Because, if you're successful enough, you can pick and choose who you want to work with.
Yeah.
But, it always reminds me of the Dark Knight, which I think is the greatest superhero movie of all time, and the Joker. If you're good at something, don't do it for free. And,
right.
You have an offer value proposition, and if it's just about 5 basis points, and they're to me, it's chiseling. And I don't like people in this business that chisel.
Yeah.
I despise it. It's like, it just, I was going to do a networking thing years ago. And then I switched it over to that annual thing I do at Citi Field with the Hyundai Club. I was going to do a networking event over there in Wright Field before it was the Cadillac Club. And it was like, I don't know, it was like $100. And there was going to be food involved. And it was somebody who was observant, kosher Jewish. And he's like, if I come in and don't eat, can I pay a little bit less? And I'm like, I mean, I understand, but it's like, I hate people who chisel. And my fees are reasonable, I think. I haven't changed my fees in 20 some odd years. And, there's a value to what you do.
Exactly. So that's why I said don't be afraid to tell people what you're worth, and that's especially on the startup or really micro plan market. I neglected to formally introduce myself. I'm the national sales director for Invesco for DCIO. I've been in the industry since the 401(k) side of the industry since '94. So a lot of experience in seeing how the industry has changed, for the better over the years. So thank you for having me here. I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen in on this presentation, whether it's live or on one of the recordings that you might be able to
Somebody
get to
wanted to
later
know
on.
if the statement of services is available to attendees.
It is. Yeah. So you can email me, and I'll be happy to email it over to you. So for those that didn't hear it earlier, my email address is William, William, .Schories, Schories, at Invesco.com. And when I'm done presenting, which will be in a couple of minutes, I'll put it in the chat, as well if I have that capability. So this is the statement of services. Happy to get a PDF of this out to anybody that wants one. And even if you're listening to this down the road on a recording on YouTube, just email me and we'll get it over to you. The other thing I wanted to share, and it's tied into this, but if you're prospecting, you know, this is a prospecting letter, basically a cold call letter that basically puts a statement of services in your cold call letter, but not directly, but it gets the client an idea. So one thing I found is cold calling is very difficult, number one. Number two, it's a numbers game. You got to take enough shots on net for something to eventually go in. But it can be very frustrating. It can be filled with rejection. But this methodology, had some success. So, I'll just read it out loud here. One of the services we provide to all of our corporate clients at ABC Financial, of course, that's made up, is an annual fiduciary review of their corporate qualified plan. We partner with several different ERISA or retirement consultants to conduct these reviews. We would like to offer that review service to you. We will review your plan under 6 primary criteria. These areas include, but are not limited to, the following: quality of the investments, administrative fees, investment expenses, plan design, participant education, and that you have a sound fiduciary process. If that sounds familiar, it's because we just covered most of those on the service agreement. If after the review we find that your plan is being operated in a low cost and efficient manner, consider it a service offered and a validation of what you have in place. If, however, we discover areas of the plan where we can enhance the design, lower fees, or improve the investments, we would greatly appreciate the opportunity to meet with you at your convenience to discuss the methods and areas of improvement we would recommend. If a plan is interested, here's the info to request. A copy of the most recent IRS Form 5500. We can obtain that on our own, though, from the DOL website. List of investments in the plan with balances, a copy of the adoption agreement or summary plan description, a copy of any invoices from the TPA or record keeper, a fee disclosure notice, and confirmation if they're currently working with an advisor, and the name of the current provider. And then, you, along with your local wholesaler from your favorite record keeping partner or DCIO firm or TPA, can help you with the analysis on where the opportunities might be to improve this plan. But a lot of this prospecting information is part of the ongoing services. So if you can find improvements or tell them something they didn't know, when I was on closing calls, one of the throwaway lines I would always use, sort of like Columbo, for those of you old enough to remember that old detective show, Peter Falk played Columbo, and he would question the suspect with innocent questions, and then he would get the gotcha question at the end. He would turn around slowly and go, "Oh, one more thing." So when I would do closing calls, I would say at this time of year, and I would alter it depending on the time of year. Oh, by the way, it's the end of January, it's almost tax season. Have you given your participants that make under $60,000 a year the notice about the retirement savers credit? And you would see blank stares almost every time. The what? Yeah, the retirement savers credit. When people that make under a certain income level not only get the deduction, but can potentially get a tax refund or a tax credit because they contributed to a plan. What are you talking about? Oh, your current advisor hasn't told you about this? Well, I know when working with so-and-so, over the years that he or she tells their clients every year about this. So it's something, to consider, being able to add value and give that client a reason to do business with you. You're not selling them. You're giving them a reason to do business with you. You're educating them. And then you make sure with this service agreement that you have it all covered, that nobody else is going to be able to come in and do something you're not. Because almost everybody changing advisors is saying the new advisor offered a strategy or that I didn't know about, or they're providing more extensive services. And most of the time, you were already doing it. They just weren't aware of it. So that's it. Happy to help out with anything. Again, I'll throw my email in the chat right now. And Ari, that's
Mike's
all
got
I got.
Mike's got a question. Any thoughts on what you would think is the best value add service or services an advisor can provide?
Any thoughts on what you would think is the best value add services? Yeah, I mean, it depends on the lens you're viewing this through, Mike. From the plan sponsor, the purpose of the plan is what? To get the employees to positive outcomes in retirement, to be able to get employees to retire. And the number one way you can do that is get them enrolled. It's not so much about what investments they pick, it's about getting them started early. So auto enrollment with auto increases is, enhancing the plan design. If it's a small business owners ask the same three questions. How much can I do for myself? How little can I do for my employees? What's it going to cost? That's their three questions. So to know that you can go in with new comparability profit sharing coupled with a cash balance plan, the employees are going to be taken care of with the minimum gateway threshold contributions, but the employer is going to be able to maximize their contribution, which is what they want. So it's a cop out of an answer, Mike, because it can be so many different things. But I would start with looking at plan design. How can you influence outcomes in a positive way? And how can you deliver a plan design that matches what that employer is looking for? Everything else follows that. So the best value add is to know the plan design or partner with somebody who does to have those two things be satisfied. Participant outcomes and a plan that matches the business owners or executives of the company's needs for their employees. And then we can flow from there. So not a direct answer, but where I would start on the pyramid and working my way down. And then as a pyramid, it gets broader and broader in terms of value adds and services.
Perfect. Bill, thank you as always. And
Yep.
let's go.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Got it. Greg Reed from Q3, you're on tap.
Hi, Ari.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm going to get started. I thank Ari for allowing me to participate in this again. I had a good time last year, and I'm glad I get to do it again. Today, what I'm going to really talk about is how to run a meeting and close a plan. This is running a meeting when you are first meeting with a plan sponsor and you're hoping to win this business. And I'm just going to talk about some of the lessons I've learned and some that I have shared with advisors and some tools that I have or our office has created that we can provide to you to make your job easier. Because I'm certain every single one of you will agree you probably know more than 99% of plan sponsors about retirement plans. The challenge is you have to express it to them in a way that's meaningful and makes them make a decision. If you were on this call last year, let me see if my slide, there we go. You remember I told a story about an advisor named Nick, this is Nick, who grew his business from zero to over $400 million in just about 4 years. And he's over $500 million now. I talk to him every day. He and I are going to be meeting with a new plan sponsor on Monday. And some of his secrets I've just kind of stolen with his help. He and I sit down and have lunch from time to time every couple of weeks. And I put together what I call a plan sponsor conversation guide. and I'm going to go over what that looks like. Now, Nick claims that the secrets to closing a plan is you have to first create doubt. You have to then establish your authority. And really what you're trying to sell them on is you. You're not trying to sell them on a product. You're trying to sell them that you're the answer to all their problems. He always points out that there are the problems they know and the problems they don't know. And the problems they don't know are the ones you're here to address, because the problems they know about, they can fix themselves. But if you create enough doubt, then they start to question whether they may have problems, and then they need somebody, and you have to demonstrate you're the expert. He also always sells them on fixing the plan where it is. We're going to talk more about that, rather than saying, I'm going to move you to some other provider, because in his mind, if I'm moving them, then I not only have to sell them on me, I have to sell them on the new provider as well. And what his experience suggests, and I'm sure most of you would agree, often the biggest barrier to moving a plan is the HR person. Because while you might get the owner on board to move to your favorite record keeper, if the HR person says, I don't want to learn a new website, I don't want to learn new paperwork, I don't want to have to move a plan, you will find that you having to try and sell that other record keeper and convince the HR person is a real barrier to closing the plan. If you can convince them that you can fix it where it is, and you just become the advisor of record, it's a much easier sale. And ultimately down the road, once you've built that relationship with the HR person and you've had the plan for a while, then you can move it to your favorite record keeper. Don't try and sell something initially that is just going to be a barrier to closing. And then he always asks for referrals, and he asks for referrals even before he's ever closed the plan. He will say, who else do you know, before he leaves the meeting. It's amazing. So today we're going to talk about the conversation guide. This has evolved over several years, but what it was designed to do is to give you as an advisor a blueprint for the things you want to be asking a plan sponsor to create that level of doubt. I shared this last year, but I didn't provide all the information. I just said we have this tool. But today we're going to talk more about it and how you can use it to close the plan. And I'm happy to send this to anybody who's on this call. I'll share my email address at the end of this call, so anybody who wants to can email me, and I'll just send it out to you. So let me discuss what this conversation guide is all about. The first page of the conversation guide is going to be a lot of information you can get before the meeting. And you can bring this with you to the meeting. I recommend you bring this with you to the meeting. You're not going to go over every single question, but what you're going to do is you're going to use it to establish that you understand their plan, or you are trying to understand their plan. And then what it does is it provides a resource when you come back. And so initially you can fill in the company name, who your contact is, their address, etc., and then confirm the things that maybe you got off the 5500 or you found out prior to the meeting. So you can confirm the industry, maybe you know that. You can confirm how long they've been in business. The next section there you'll notice is called Plan Goals. And I love the Plan Goals section because a lot of times they're not even sure what those goals are. I mean, they have a plan because they check a box. They're supposed to have a plan. But if you start to ask them about the concerns they have about their plan, and they may not even know how to articulate concerns. They might think everything's fine, but you can plant the seed. You can say, are you concerned about your employees' readiness to retire? I noticed that it looks like you've got 100 eligible employees, but only 65 of them are in the plan. Are you concerned about the other employees? And if they say, yeah, I really wish the other employees would participate, then check that box. If you ask them, are you concerned about your liability with this plan? If they say yes, check that box. You're really hoping to get a couple of these goals that you can come back and address later, because you want them to say, yeah, I wanted to make sure my fees are low, and I'm really concerned about my employees' ability to retire, and I wish I could put away more money. Whatever the objections or the goals they have, make a note of it, check the box, and then when you come back for your next meeting, because there's going to be another meeting, you're going to refer back to that and say, when we were last here, you told me this was a concern of yours. Is it still a concern of yours? And they're going to say yes. and then make sure, because I'm going to address that today, but I want to make sure I cover all the things that are important to you. So I think the plan goals section sets you up for the next meeting, because clearly, if they're concerned about it, then their current advisor is not addressing it in a way that makes sense to them. Then the next section below that you see is alerts. If you're familiar with Larkspur or Judy Diamond or any of those, they will usually identify these, and sometimes they will call them risks. They're not all risks. I put alerts on here, but these are things that are pulled from their 5500 and are things you could address. For example, if they don't have a QDIA or if they don't have automatic enrollment, obviously they're not required to have automatic enrollment, at least they hadn't been historically. Now it's encouraged for every new plan, but or an insufficient fidelity bond, that one's probably a bigger risk. But when you go through these issues that come out of the 5500, if you've got those pre-checked on this form, when you come into the meeting, you can say, I noticed that there was a corrective distribution made last year. Then you can address that question and you can ask them about it. And what's neat about that is you're establishing some knowledge about their plan that maybe they aren't aware of. You can talk to them about why automatic enrollment is worth having in the plan, or why they should have a QDIA, or why an insufficient fidelity bond might set them up for an audit. So any one of these things, while not necessarily a liability, they're at least something that you can address and demonstrate some knowledge about the industry that they might not have. Participant loans, clearly a large percentage of plans out there have participant loans, but addressing how they're being used might be worthwhile. Nick went into a plan, they had participant loans. He was talking to the investment committee, and one of the guys on the investment committee mentioned that there was an employee. This is a company that makes, it's a tier 2 supplier for automotive. And he said one of the employees had mentioned that he had used a loan from his 401k to buy a TV for the Super Bowl. And he said, and now half the people on the floor are using their 401k like a bank account, and they're pulling money out to buy things that like TVs and things. So Nick was able to use that as an educational opportunity. He said, well, your employees don't realize how expensive that TV is, because they're losing out on the opportunity cost of having that money in the 401k. And it's just one more way you can demonstrate value, because you can say, would it be worthwhile if I did an education to your employees about when it would be prudent to take a loan and when you'd be better off not taking the loan? And it was just one more value add. Next is information about existing plan characteristics. So this is going to be how long the plan's been around. Is there a question?
I didn't see any pop up yet.
No, I just heard somebody's voice.
There's like feedback somewhere with the microphone, I think, somewhere.
Gotcha. So you can talk about what type of plan it is. You can fill all that in, fill in who the current provider is. You may get that if they had an audit, but if they didn't, you'll need to ask the plan sponsor that. Collect all the information you can here, because these are going to be things you're going to come back to later. You want to know who the current record keeper is, who the current TPA is, if it's something different than the record keeper. You want to know who the current advisor is. Nick hopes that they're going to say the current advisor is Edward Jones or Merrill Lynch. He doesn't like it when they say the current advisor is Bob. We love Bob. He always brings donuts. He doesn't want to hear it's Bob. He wants to hear a company name as opposed to the advisor's name. We would all rather they think my advisor is Mike, or my advisor is Jim, or my advisor is Mary, because if they're using your first name, then they've got a connection to you. If they're using your firm name, that's an indication they probably aren't all that connected to you. So he's hoping that's what they tell him. Oh, our advisor's Edward Jones. You fill out all of this, and then then the next section is where things get more valuable. Next page is where we're going to start to create doubt. So all of this is stuff you're going to use for later. You're going to use this when you come back. You're going to say, I see the plan is with Nationwide. The current provider is Morgan Stanley. They've got 145 eligible employees, but only 105 participate. Here's how many assets there are. And by collecting all of that information, when you come back for your closing meeting, you're going to be able to point out that these are things you learned from their last meeting, and here's how you can help them. For example, you're going to help them get more employee participation, and you're familiar with Nationwide and you know how to work with them. Now, here's where we start to create doubt. This is really the most important page, I think, and it's plan design details. It's the first question is going to be, who makes up your investment committee? It almost doesn't matter the answer here, but what's great about it for you is you're hoping that they get confused about the investment committee. If they don't realize what the investment committee is, maybe they'd say I was at the 401k committee, and then say, well, do you review the investments? Do you have an investment policy statement? What are the expertise of the people on the committee? Do you have people who are real knowledgeable about investments? How often do they meet? Do they rely on the investment policy statement whenever they're reviewing the investments? How do they benchmark the investments? Because all you're really hoping they will do is start to question whether they have the experience to do it. As was mentioned in the previous presentation, the plan sponsor has a duty to do what is prudent, what a prudent expert would do. And if they don't have that skill, they should be outsourcing it. So if they don't currently have a 338 on this plan and they have an investment committee, it might be prudent for them to hire somebody to help them with it. Now, they might think that Bob, their current advisor, does that. And if they said Bob is the one that picks all the investments, you could ask them, well, does Bob take on liability? Do you know if he is acting as a 338? Well, we don't know. I'm not sure if he's acting as a 338. Well, do you have anything in writing from Bob that tells you that he's on the hook for making decisions? Has Bob ever removed an investment from your plan and replaced it with a better investment? And if they say Bob has been part of this plan for years and we have never removed an investment, there's a really good chance he's not acting as a 338. Now, they may not think Bob does it. They might say Mary, who's our CFO, and Fred, who's the president, and 2 or 3 employees are the investment committee. So then you can start asking them questions about what their process is. How frequently are they meeting? And if they say, well, we meet once a quarter, well, that's great. And where do you get the information to review the investments? And they say, well, they send it to us. Fidelity sends us a report and we look at it. Okay. Do you measure the investments against their peers? Any one of these questions is really meant to get them to question whether they're doing what they're supposed to do, because they're not experts. They are not experts in 401k management. They're certainly probably not investment experts. I got to sit in on a meeting one day with an advisor and a plan sponsor, and I asked, how did the investment committee, now this was a closed plan already, but I asked, how did this investment committee get put together? And it was the CFO and the president and 2 other employees. And the president is the president, and that's why he's on the committee. And the CFO, she was on the committee, but interestingly, she didn't participate in the plan, but she was on the investment committee. And then the other 2 guys, I said, and how did you get on the plan? And the president said, well, they're the 2 guys who talk the most about investments in the office. And I said, oh, what's your experience? And the one guy loved penny stocks and the other guy loved Tesla. And that was their experience. And so it was clear that none of them were really investment experts. And they were relying on each other to decide what investments should be in the plan. And all they could do is look at whatever was being sent to them by the current record keeper. And hopefully they decided it was worthwhile because they had no basis for measuring the investments. So by asking these kinds of questions, you can create doubt. If they say they have no formal process in place, well, that's a really great opportunity for you. Then ask them about whether they have a match, and then ask if it's a safe harbor match. And if they say, well, we don't have a safe harbor match, but we do have a match, ask them why they chose not to have a safe harbor match. Essentially, you're trying to make them start to think that they don't know enough about this business and you do. Then down the road, you can ask, has the plan undergone a Department of Labor audit in the last 3 years? Now, it is unlikely that their plan has gone through an audit in the last 3 years. the Department of Labor can't audit all the plans in the country every 3 years. But by asking the question and throwing that number on there, it makes them start to think there's the possibility that they could be audited, maybe something they've never even considered. And if they said, no, we haven't been audited in the last 3 years, then you ask, has your plan been benchmarked to prepare you for an audit in the last 3 years? We don't think our plan's been benchmarked. Oh, well, we can take care of that. We'll be able to help you analyze your plan so that you're prepared if there is an audit, we'll get you some more information. And then, has your plan ever been part of a lawsuit? All you're doing is trying to create those seeds of doubt. So again, you ask, has your plan ever been part of a lawsuit? That implies that that's a possibility. And you can point out that a number of plans have been parts of lawsuits recently. As a matter of fact, the number of lawsuits has increased in the last 10 years. Matter of fact, large companies like Costco was sued by their employees. Walgreens was sued by their employees. We just want to make sure that your plan has never been part of a lawsuit. No, we've never been part of a lawsuit, but you start to make them think that's a possibility. Suddenly, we could be part of a lawsuit, and it's not something we'd ever considered. And then the last question on this page is, if there was no limit to how much money you could be putting into your retirement plan, how much would you be putting away? Now, this is a question really you're asking the plan sponsor. You're asking the business owner. If it's a small enough company where that employer is the bulk of the assets or the plan is really to benefit them, you might be surprised if they said, oh, if I could put away $200,000 a year, I would, or $300,000 a year. We have an advisor in Lansing, Michigan, and he was cold calling small companies. Bill had mentioned previously, cold calling plans can be really frustrating. I have found that cold calling large plans really frustrating, but you can cold call small plans who never hear from anybody. You can call the plumber and the electrician who has 5 employees, and often you'll get that person on the phone. But he had called a company that does collections, medical collections, and he said, I notice your plan. It's one that, it's the size of a plan I typically can help. Can I send you some information about your plan? And the guy on the phone said, we're not interested. My brother and I don't even participate in the plan. And Kevin, the advisor, said, you don't participate in your own plan? Why is that? And they said, well, because every year we kept getting our money sent back. And so we decided the plan wasn't for us. And Kevin said, if there was no limit to how much you could put into your plan, what would you be putting away? And he said, between my brother and I, we'd put away close to $1 million if we could. So these are 2 guys who have a very successful business, who would love to put away a lot more money, who are putting 0 away because they kept getting a corrective distribution and no one ever explained it to them. Now, in that case, that plan was with one of the payroll companies, it was either Paychex or ADP, and they just weren't getting the level of service because it was a small plan that nobody paid attention to. And the fact that Kevin said, let me see what I can do to help you put away more money, it won him the plan. He called me, we got on the phone with an actuary, we got the census from him, we put together an illustration of what it would look like if you made it a safe harbor plan, you added a profit sharing plan, you added a cash balance plan, and suddenly they were able to put away $300,000 each instead of 0. Now, it wasn't the million they wanted to put away, but it was a huge difference. And suddenly they were getting service, and Kevin was landing a plan that nobody would have paid any attention to. So I point out that that's a great question to ask if you're talking to a business owner, if you're thinking maybe plan design would be a way to win this plan. Then the last page is essentially kind of a plan fiduciary discussion. This is actually where a lot of times I work with Ari on some plans where he is the 316, the name plan fiduciary. And so you can ask, do you document the decisions at every meeting? Do you have a process in place? Do you formalize the recording of that? When was the last time you had your fees benchmarked? Do you have a process in place where you manage the fiduciary risk with sponsoring the plan? Most of them don't understand what their role is. And so you can start to explain to them what that means, what their expectations are as a plan sponsor. Do you regularly review and update your plan document? Bill had pointed out that somebody had an investment policy statement that suggested that they could only invest in mutual funds, and suddenly they had CITs. So if no one is reviewing these things, then they're not doing their job, and maybe they would find it would be worthwhile to work with you. Do you understand the fiduciary duties under ERISA? If they say yes, oh, I'm not sure if I am. So by asking all these questions, you have now planted some seeds of doubt. Then what I'm going to suggest is you collect their plan document if they'll give it to you, their 408(b)(2) fee disclosure if they'll give it to you. If they won't give you those things, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to win this plan. But if you can get those, then the next step, in my mind, is you reach out to me, because I can help you win the plan. If you send me the questionnaire and you send me the fee disclosure and the plan document if they have it, I will run the FI 360 investment analysis for the investments in the plan and send that along to you. I'll use a Larkspur report and put that together. But I think these are only pretty standard things you can get a lot of places. But what else we can do for you is we'll put together a plan sponsor discussion report. It'll take all of the things that we have. It'll take the 5500 information, the Larkspur information, the investment information, and it will take your questionnaire and it will put together a Microsoft Word document that you can then edit. You can put your logo on it. You can get it approved by your broker dealer, and it'll have a plan snapshot with all key features of the plan. It'll put key findings, things that we noticed based on the questionnaire and some of the other issues and some fixes. We'll talk about their fiduciary situation, how they might improve it. We'll explain why these recommendations make sense and next steps. So essentially, it will look like you went back to your office, you did a deep dive on their plan, you typed up a report for them, and it's very personalized. It's got your name on it. It's got all the information about their plan. So when you sit down, it looks like you have done a lot of work in a way that most people would never have to present to them. In addition to that, I'll give you an advisor battle card. It's a complement to that other piece. It has a 30-second pitch. It has the plan data, but then it also has common objections that you're likely to get from the plan sponsor based on the information that we've got. It gives you some negotiating levers because, again, we talked about the fact that you're not planning to move this to a new record keeper. What you're really hoping to do is get them to change the rep of record to you. So all you really need to do is create enough doubt, have enough concerns that you can then address, and then say, don't worry, we can fix these issues. And then it also gives you some closing steps to ask the plan sponsor, and then a follow-up email. And then to close the plan, you just say, I'm confident we can meaningfully improve this plan without changing the provider or creating extra work for your team. So now you have disarmed the HR person, and you're saying this is about bettering the oversight of your plan, not blowing anything up. Would you like me to negotiate with Fidelity or Nationwide or John Hancock on your behalf? If they say yes, get them to sign the form. And then you may not close this plan. Even though you have done a great job, you've said all the right things, you've created the doubt, you've demonstrated your knowledge, and they may still want Bob to bring them donuts. But you know so much about this plan now that you can still close it in a quarter or in 6 months, because there's going to come a time where Bob isn't going to remember to bring the donuts, and he's going to drop the ball in some way. And so you're going to continually follow up because you know so much about this plan. So you can do a fiduciary check-in. You can say, I just want to follow up. Remember, we talked a month or two ago. I know you weren't ready to make a change, but if you'd like, I just want to keep in touch with you so that if anything ever comes up, you know I can be a resource. And that gives you one reason to touch. Then the next time you're going to touch is when the market gets really volatile. And you're going to say, given recent market swings, I've been checking in on my plans to go over how their investments are performing in all this uncertainty. I like to provide those performance checkups on a regular basis. Would you like me to show you what's going on with your current investment lineup? Because we have that now because they gave it to you in your last meeting. So here, 4 months later, when the market is scary and something in the news has spooked everybody, you can reach out to that plan and offer to come back in and discuss their investment lineup. And Bob hasn't done that because it's not on his regular rotation to come back and do this. So you'll show up, go over their investments, and eventually they'll say, you know what, we would rather have you than Bob. Now, maybe that doesn't do it. You can say, it's been a few months since we went through your investment lineup, and you do this at the end of a quarter. Plan data can change quickly. I can easily update the fiduciary report that I brought you last time and show you whether your scores have shifted any. Would you like me to refresh that report and bring it by? It's another reason to touch them. And here we are 6 months later, and you're still talking to them about how to fix their plan. But how much time does it take you? You just reach out to me and I hit resubmit, and it updates it to the most current data. And then maybe you do a participant-focused follow-up. You can say, I've been thinking about our discussion about participant outcomes. You mentioned you were concerned about the number of participants who didn't realize why they should be in the plan. I have some coaching tips. I have a presentation that I like to give to participants, and I'm willing to come give that presentation to your employees if you think it would be helpful for your team, even though I'm not your advisor. Would you like an educational event for your employees? Guess what? You have now demonstrated multiple times that you are better than the person they have now. And every single time you're bringing that single one-page rep of record change form with you, and eventually they're going to sign that form. So that's my presentation today. I hope it was worth your time. I'm open for questions if anyone has any questions, but if anyone wants to get a copy of any of these things, an example of those reports that I talked about,
Yeah,
or the
somebody
questionnaire,
inquired
just
about the
email
slide
me.
deck, so they should email you for the slide deck.
Perfect. Yeah, email me and I'll send you everything. Do you have any
Perfect.
comments, Ari?
No, it's always fantastic. It's always enlightening. And and I always like, sometimes, you see decks, not at these events, but usually sometimes you see decks and it's just like over people's heads. And this is something that's very practical that advisors certainly could use to help with their practice. So I appreciate it. It delivered like I thought it would.
Thanks.
You got it. Next, if he's there, Ron Stair.
Here.
Yeah,
Hold
Ron Stair from BPAS. And I know Ron when I was a lowly associate at some, and I think Ron will, he always gives constructive criticism how I should never bring up that Fakakta law firm. But I know Ron,
A lowly associate at a lower law firm.
no, a Fakakta law firm. I got to use my Yiddish. Ron was, I met Ron, I think, through networking events. I want to say it was networking events, and it was like the attorneys, accountants group on Long Island and stuff like that. And Ron was really helpful with constructive criticism and advice. And Ron, you won some honor recently. Was it the actuary who actually speaks English? It was something along those lines.
It was a very busy week. The International Association of Top Professionals named me the Consulting Actuary of the Year. That's an international group. The International Association of Actuaries named me to the director of their pension board. And the Long Island Business News said I'm one of the Long Island icons this year.
That's great because usually, so some places they give you an award and it's just like, how big was the ad? The managing attorney in my old law firm was always the CEO of the year and ran the firm down 50% in 16 years, whatever. But Ron was very helpful at the beginning of my career and always with a good word of advice and stuff like that. And again, Ron's one of those actuaries who speaks English. It's my two favorite actuaries are Ron Stair and Andy Zimney, who also happens to work for Ron. And I joke about it, but we had actuaries when I worked at some TPAs where you couldn't bring them to a meeting. They would stammer. They would be over a plan sponsor's head, and it's always great to deal with people who know their business and can talk English to plan sponsors. And same thing with risk attorneys. A lot of risk attorneys who speak ERISA's, no different. So Ron, take it away.
Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this now. There we go. Share.
At the share button, yep.
Yeah, now there I am. Screen. Why is this not sharing?
There it is.
Oh, get this out of there. So, cash balance plans. We're hearing about these a lot these days, but nobody knows really what they are. How do I? So the question really becomes one is, and it was touched on by the last speaker. What is the client trying to do? Do they want to put away more money? Do they want to put away less money? Nobody talks to the client about the day-to-day operation of a plan because they tend to be set and forget type of components. And we find that's true of every type of plan. And this is my 53rd year of doing this. I'm a pre-ERISA guy, so I have watched this from the very beginning. This is the world that most of you live in here. It's your 401k limits. And every so often I'll get a question and somebody will come to me and say, geez, I'd like to put away a lot more money. And I'll say, well, how much would you like to put away? And they say, well, maybe, $80,000 or $90,000. Well, if the compensation is high enough, I could do this in a 401k profit sharing arrangement. I don't need to add a defined benefit or a cash balance plan on top. So this is the first kind of a component. Client I had a conversation with yesterday said, I want to put away about 85 to 90,000. Well, if I can get you to 80,000 inside a 401k plan without a lot of stretch, is it worth all the expense and administrative overhead to put away another $10,000 or $15,000? It may be, but then again, it may not be. So these are the kinds of things that need to be looked at. These are the limits. Every year, the IRS gives us cost of living increases in what we're allowed to contribute to plans. Stepping back for a moment, in 1986, the limits were substantially high, and then the IRS cut the knees out from underneath. And we just got back to the 1986 limits 3 years ago. So we don't know that these are guarantees prospectively, because when the government gets hungry for money, this is one of the places that they start to look to cut back. And it's always a balancing act with the government, because they recognize the social requirements and needs of us having retirement plans, but they're very hungry. So they want this money. So currently we can fund, here in this 2026 column, we can fund for a benefit of $290,000 a year, or 100% of the high 3-year average compensation, whichever's less. So if I'm suddenly get a fund for a benefit of $290,000 a year, I need roughly $3.7 million at age 62. So start to look at that as, if we're going to fund between a specific age and age 62 to get the $3.7 million, how much am I going to put away every year to get there at 5% interest? That's really what we're looking at. Maximum compensation we're allowed to use is $360,000 this year. So we're going to run through a series of examples. The first component here is we've got 3 people, 3 different ages, the same W-2. The person that's 40 can make about a $90,000 defined benefit contribution. The person that's 50 can put in about $141,000, and a person that's 60 can put away $233,000. If these people increase their compensation, these numbers would be higher, but I just did everybody at the same dollar of W-2, so you get a sense of the differences at different ages. Now, what you'll find interesting is if somebody is in their 20s, and we have some people that are these influencer type people, we have some reality TV people, they're in their 20s. They're still putting away this $90,000 a year, but what's going to happen is around the 4th, 5th year, their contribution is going to disappear because compound interest is going to take over. And they have so many years between their current age and retirement that what's going to happen is around the 6th or 7th year, their contribution is going to drop back down to $30,000, $40,000 a year. And their bucket is essentially going to get filled early. But as one of our reality TV people said, how long do you think this gig is going to last? It's reality TV. So she was content with having a plan that was going to disappear after 5 years. So knowing your client and knowing where their situation is and how long they anticipate being able to fund these plans is also an important question to ask up front. So we talk about cash balance plans. Much like the payroll companies, I'm going to step back for a minute. When we look at the 401k plan, there are 104 permutations of things you can do with the 401k plan. Almost every record keeper is going to limit you to 4 to 6 of those permutations, because if they take it off their assembly line, it becomes the I Love Lucy chocolate factory. So in their case, one size fits everybody because they've only got 42 regulars on their rack. The reality is one size doesn't fit all. Businesses will change no matter what we do this year. I know next year what's going to change. Demographics will change. The tax laws will change. The client's cash flow will change. The client's appetite for certain commitments will change. Something will change. The market's going to go up. The market's going to go down. It's going to affect businesses in general. So you want your plans to be flexible so you're not stuck with something that becomes burdensome to you. So what are the pros and cons of a cash balance plan? Now, cash balance plans, there's no magic. They are simply defined benefit plans in a different wrapper. But instead of expressing the plan as a benefit at retirement in terms of a monthly annuity, we're talking about a lump sum of money that people are going to have, and the annual reports, instead of having your present value of your future accrued benefit, which already people have glazed over on, you have an account balance that gets credited with an interest rate. And it looks and feels like a 401k plan on steroids, even though it's not. But it's an easy fix to communicate to your plan participants. Where they're advantageous is, to the most part, is one, the employee cost is manageable. We know exactly what our liabilities are at any time, because in a traditional defined benefit plan, I've got 3 sets of interest rates and 3 sets of mortality tables that play against each other. And in a cash balance plan, I only have the assumptions that I assume in the first place when we design the plan. So we know exactly what our liabilities are at any one time. Another real advantage for this is if I have partners that are at different ages, I don't have a whipsaw effect in the cost of the plan. So if I have a partner that's 60 and another partner that's 40, the partner that's 60 is getting a lot more money than the guy that's 40, but nobody knows exactly what that differential is because of those differential in interest rates. And it's this way we define exactly what each person's going to get, and they can tidy it up with their internal bookkeeping and accounting. So the pros are you get larger contributions. If the plan is designed properly and the homework's done up front, there's some funding flexibility. These contributions are primarily age weighted. The older person has the ability to get more money, even though they don't have to. I can combine it with other plans easily, and everything's tax deductible. The cons of permanency. The IRS says if we're going to put in a retirement plan, we want that plan to be permanent. Permanent means different things to different people. To the IRS, they're looking for 3 to 5 years. We have had plans that have terminated after 1 year. They have been audited. Our argument to the IRS was, we meant it to be permanent. You changed the rules. COVID, we had a lot of plans that terminated during COVID. There was a problem getting through stuff. So they terminated. Plan fees, they're much more expensive to run in a 401k plan. Actuaries are expensive. I don't think expensive enough, but we're expensive. The investments tend to be more conservative. So I'm looking for a 5% rate of return. I won't bore you with all the reasons we like 5%. It ties into a bunch of other government stuff. But many of our clients tend to look at this as part of their balanced aggregate portfolio, and this is where their conservative investments go, and they roll the dice more in their 401k profit sharing IRA world. What also comes with this is increased complexity. I live in a code section 401A4, which is our discrimination areas. It was a 783-page regulation, which was one big run-on math formula. That's the world I live in. And the reason this is complex, not only because for that reason, I live in a world of permissive discrimination. So unlike many people, I don't care about the employees at all unless the employer tells me that he or she cares about the employees. So to me, a plan that is not top heavy is poorly designed. For those of you not familiar with the term, top heavy means the principals have more than 60% of the money. Once the employee cost exceeds the employer's tax savings, the plan no longer makes economic sense. It may make emotional sense for a variety of other business reasons, but it doesn't make economic sense. So my goal and my job when we design plans is to keep the employee cost to less than the tax hit that the employer would have otherwise. So again, we talked on this. It's a type of a defined benefit plan. It is a qualified plan. It's subject to things. Creditor protection. We took over a plan about 3 months ago. The guy said, I'm creditor protected. I said, no, you're not. He said, they told me I was. Creditor protection only extends to a plan that is covered under ERISA, under Title I. To be under Title I, you have to have a plan that covers employees. If you're self-employed, you are not an employee for purposes of this section. So we have had clients go out and just hire a part-timer, brought them into the plan early, purely to gather this creditor protection. Just, it's one of the little subtle nuances in the rules, but be aware of it. Doesn't matter what form of business entity you are, you can have these plans. And if you don't have employees, you can do some mega backdoor Roth planning, and it also allows for portability. So okay, again, cash balance plans are defined benefit plans. They act and look like a defined contribution plan, even though they're not to. And they're referred to as a hybrid plan because it really does take pieces of both the defined contribution world and the defined benefit world. The employees have individual accounts, but it's not like you're going to go to Fidelity and look online and say, oh, how much is in my account? Because where the differences are between defined benefit and defined contribution is in that defined contribution space. I physically have my own account. So I have a case of water and each of us has a different size bottle. Defined benefit plans, I've got a bucket of water and we ladle it out at the tail end. So it's really a aggregate funded plan, one account, but we can give you an account statement to tell you how much of that big bucket you own. The other primary difference is defined benefit plans are normally going to be structured to pay out a monthly annuity at retirement. Cash balance plans are designed to pay out a lump sum. That's how much money can we get into these plans? There's two sets of limits that we pay attention to. How much can the plan have as a limit, and how much can each participant get? So in your profit sharing plans, for example, a participant can get up to 100% of pay and up to $72,000, but the plan will have a limit of 25% of pay. So those things start to contradict each other. I have had financial advisors who want to play stump the actuary. They go look in ChatGPT. They come back and say, oh, look, I can do this. No, you can't because you only got half the equation. But anyway, these are your limits on the defined contribution side. This is the employer limits. The catch-up rules have changed dramatically this year. Are the payroll companies going to catch this and get it right? Questionable. We find they're not asking questions. The biggest problem we're finding with a lot of the payroll companies is many of these rules take a look back to the prior year, and if people have recently changed payroll companies or changed PEOs, the historical information isn't there for anybody to look back to prior year compensation. And that's where some of these subtleties and nuances here are going to have some problems. Your profit sharing cost in a cash balance plan is going to be somewhere in that range of 5 to 7.5% of pay. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's a little bit higher. It's really a function of demographics and also how many people are we throwing out of the plan. 410B basically says I've got to cover certain numbers of people on a ratio basis. So I can start randomly throwing people out, but I still have a minimum coverage requirement that comes into play. When we throw people out of plans, this becomes an internal political issue in small plans. It's like, I'm covering Bobby, but I'm not covering Susie. Susie may be cranky about that. Susie may not even be aware of it. But it happens, and you do have to be aware of it inside in that space. So in this case here, the first one here, I got a 35-year-old IT consultant. His W-2 compensation is $200,000. He's a sub F. He's got 150,000 of K1. We don't care about the K1. It's not compensation. It's income. Basically, if you don't pay FICA on it, we don't get to use it. It's not compensation. So he's got total income of 350,000, but only 200,000 that we care about. And in this situation, his 401k deferral is the 23.5. His profit sharing contribution is only $12,000. And we'll come to that in a moment. His cash balance contribution is 92,000. He's putting away 127,000. The reason his profit sharing contribution is only 12,000 instead of 46 and change is because one of the other rules say that if you have a defined benefit plan and you don't have any rank and file employees, or your defined benefit plan and you're a professional service organization with fewer than 25 employees, you don't file with the PBGC, which is the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is sort of like the FDIC of pensions. If you're not filing with the PBGC, your contribution limits are scaled back in your profit sharing plan to 6% of pay. So having said that, that's why he's only going to get $12,000 in this equation. The 58-year-old physician who's making $600,000 with the same $200,000 W-2 is able to put away $259,000. Again, that's just purely a factor of age. He's got an extended 401k deferral because he's got catch-up, the same $12,000 profit sharing, but getting a lot more money. Here I got a 65-year-old attorney. Of course, the attorney's making the most money because, well, they do. W-2 comp 345, 2 million business profit. Because he's 65, we're able to put away almost $500,000 a year in the cash balance plan. His profit sharing is higher because his W-2 comp is higher. Other than that, same straightforward kind of calculation. After Secure 2, we were given the ability to put retirement plans in after the year is over. So it took away the big crunch at the year end, and it now enables us, we're doing plans today for last year because we can. And as the accountants now are starting to do the tax work for clients, this is becoming a very interesting environment because now they're looking, they have the ability to look at this in the rear view mirror instead of guessing. So as we get closer to March 15th, we will get incredibly busy. Last year, we onboarded about 45 plans between February 15th and March 15th because they realized what their tax bite was for the prior year. And we put the plans in. Now, where this gets hanky is two things. I can't retroactively put in a 401k plan because you had to have had the ability to contribute salary deferrals. And if you had no compensation and if you had no plan in that year establishing that ability, you can't have the 401k. So I can go backwards and do the profit sharing component. And I'll add the 401k now in 26, but in 25, there would have been limited to this $6,000 of profit sharing contribution. The other thing we need to be careful of is as we get closer to June, people have already earned their benefit in the defined benefit plan for 26. So our plan document drafting has to be very, very specific. What do you want to do for 25? And what do you think your appetite's going to be for 26? Because once you've crossed over that period of 1,000 hours and you own that benefit, that's a document issue and that's a commitment. So when we're doing retro plans, you really need to pay attention to the 2-year, both the 2 different years that we're dealing with because of that overlap. Again, they work in larger plans as well. This is one where I've got 4 rank and file employees. This is fairly straightforward. I've got the owner, I've got the spouse. The spouse has a low compensation number. She's putting 30 grand into her. They're both maxing out their 401k. They're both getting some profit sharing money. They're both getting a big cash balance contribution. And at the end of the day, they're getting 97% of the money. Again, we talked about compensation. You want to get your illustration, but we're gonna beat people up on compensation because they come back to us and we get you won't believe the garbage we see from some clients and accountants. They just don't understand really what compensation is from that perspective. So we have to educate them that. In today's world of serial entrepreneurs, control groups and affiliated service groups become an issue. It's not uncommon for us to have clients that have multiple buckets of compensation. I've got doctors that own car washes. I own lawyers that literally owns a pizza parlor. All of those employees have to be looked at in that kind of a space. And then 199A, which is qualified business income, that comes into play as well. Because sometimes if we are the only above the line deduction in this environment. So sometimes we can bring high earning professionals down into the level where they can take advantage of 199A. And other times it takes away the advantages. So for those of you that don't know what that is, let's assume I have an individual who's making $300,000 net in a subchapter S Corp with $100,000 of compensation and on a W-2 and $200,000 of K-1 distributions from the sub S. That $200,000, they only pay tax on 80% of it. It's 20% of that money is tax-free. So $40,000 tax-free is better than $40,000 tax-deferred. So what I don't want to do is put so much money into the retirement plan that it takes away the advantages of the 199A deduction. And this is where consulting with the accountants comes into play. Every plan has a sweet spot of contribution to 199A distributions. Deadlines. Deadline for this plan to put this in for 25 is going to be realistically, I can run it right up to September 15th of 26. I'm sorry. Yeah, September 15th of 26. However, the plan has to be funded by September 15th of 26. So our real cutoff is probably the middle of August to put in a plan for 2025. Because even though the tax return is not due until 9.5 months after the end of the year, minimum funding is 8.5 months after the end of the year. So you don't get to October 15th with a defined benefit plan from a funding perspective. When you're going out to see the clients, interview, find out what they're trying to do. Why are they doing this? Plans are really 4 things. It's a tax shelter for me. It's a retirement plan for me. It's an employee benefit. It's an employee benefit for select employees. I don't like them all the same. Consult with whoever your actuary is on different examples. Talk about the funding requirements, and then confirm with the client, is this really what you want to do, and are you comfortable with it? And that's pretty much it. I mean, they are as flexible as you want them to be. Decent demographics give you really wonderful results. And I will tell you, most of our clients are in that 50 to 65-year demographic because that was the generation that was sandwiched. They were taking care of their parents, and they're still taking care of their parents. They're taking care of their children who are still living at home, and they never took care of themselves. And they're at the height of their earning for the most part. And this is how they're trying to play catch up. Any questions?
Yeah, there are two. Number one from Mike Webb. Is the only payout retirement for a cash balance plan a lump sum, or can we also do partial payments, installments like we do in a 401k? Just thinking about the tax liability since the cash balance amount is going to be huge for many.
The answer is yes, you can, but the smart money says you take the lump sum and roll it to an IRA.
Right.
So even if people are post-retirement age, like they're age 62 and they're still accruing benefits, oftentimes we will tell them to take the age 62 benefit out of the plan, move it to the IRA, because any earnings, I'm now on the downside. So any excess earnings start to reduce my lump sum prospectively. So I want to get the money out of the defined benefit plan and into the IRA so the earnings don't affect my future contributions. Secondly, the IRA is far more flexible from a distribution perspective, post-mortem and post-retirement.
Sure.
The attorneys have no idea what to do with these plans. They do understand IRAs.
And then the same question, I guess, what do folks actually do in the year of taking lump sum? That would be an enormous tax year unless there's a way they can often stage beyond that. So I mean,
Well, they take it and roll it to an IRA.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it is.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Ron, great as always. It's always a treat to hear an actuary who speaks English. And I always love the cash balance discussion. I used to do a lot of events with Carlos Torice. He used to be at Kravitz, and he would do these 401k recon events. He was always the most popular guy in the room because cash balance is one thing advisors need to add to their wheelhouse for their clients.
Well, just a side note, I was in Home Depot a couple of months ago, and the employee of the month was a guy named Dan Kravitz. So I took a picture of it and sent it to Dan and said that I didn't know he had a new job.
Well, I think he might be less busy these days. I don't know what's going on. I haven't seen him in a while, but yeah, that I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity, folks. And anybody
Yeah.
needs, hold on,
There's one last question. Isn't the cash
Yes.
balance plan required to provide a meaningful benefit to the NHCs, like 0.5% of pay?
It is. So that 0.5, that 0.5% of pay. So basically what that says is how much money do I have to give you to give you the equivalent of 0.5% of pay at retirement? And that's a function of how old people are and how much their compensation is. But that's how we tend to structure them for the most part using that formula. And that just generally gives us the most leverage.
Right.
But again, we got a lot of plans. We're throwing 60% of the people out of the plan.
Sure.
Because we can.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Okay. Thanks again, Ron.
All right, folks. Thank you.
And last but not least, James Hollins, who wants me to run his slideshow for him, but what are friends for, you know?
Exactly. Appreciate it, Ari.
Yeah, I always tell the story. James, one of the things that always annoys me the crap out of LinkedIn is you hear from an advisor wants to connect with you, and all they immediately want to do to me is not to develop a relationship, it's to sell me. As if I don't know hundreds of advisors over the last 27 years. And if I did need an advisor, I imagine I would call somebody like James or somebody else that I know forever. And I was introduced James. So the idea is, in this business, relationships are built on trust. So I remember when James and we connected on LinkedIn, and we always had the same, thought on fees and whatnot. And James called me out of the blue. I remember where I was when I was working. I just started my practice. I was literally working in my bed, talking to James on the phone. And I said James called me to make sure I wasn't a maniac, in the sense that relationships in the retirement plan business is based on trust. And you have to vet the people, who you work with. Because, I know two people who went to federal prison for stealing plan assets because they thought they could. Luckily, it wasn't my assets. But, that the whole point is that everything in this business takes time and takes trust. You can't connect with somebody tomorrow and start selling them, or start, thinking that, I got introduced as advisor, he's going to start referring me business. It doesn't work that way. It takes time and whatnot. And that's only 16 years ago. So
Yeah,
James,
exactly,
anyway,
exactly. But I mean, that's the whole business, and that's one of the things that we try to tell the advisors too. And I know Greg went into it a good bit. This is a marathon, not a sprint. In terms
correct.
of people don't, it's not, especially when you're dealing with multiple people's money. Again, you're looking at it from an individual basis. It's a little bit different, but when you're talking tens, hundreds, thousands of employees, then you have a whole other aspect that you have to worry about. So, and Ari, again, I think he said it's been about 16 years. One of the things that one of the many things that sets Ari apart, besides that, and we said it 100 times during these different meetings, is you can call and ask a question and get an answer and get some help, and you don't get a bill, 25 minutes later that says he talked to you for 24 minutes and, it's X dollars. He's about helping out and developing those relationships, and that's how you succeed in this business. So, appreciate the time this afternoon. I know we're up against the end of this whole thing, so a little bit different approach this year. So one of the things we found was the retirement world and the benefit world and the healthcare world are all starting to collide, and advisors need to be armed with not the answers, but the access to everything in terms of what people are looking for. And I know we talked a good bit about the AI approach to things. Well, we came across this program here called My Purpose Plan, and it's a way for advisors to better connect to their clients on a number of different levels. But it's also great for employers, for employees, to help them, dig a little bit deeper about themselves. Brian, are you on?
He's not. Is
He's
he?
not.
Yeah, he's not listed.
All right, hang on. So my partner Brian is the specialist here. He says he's logged on, but he can't hear him. So hang on. Is there a way of, can you see him? Or
Let me see. Participants. He's not listed as a panelist.
yeah, right. Hang on. Do you see him as an, can we make him a panelist? He's an attendee, Brian Berry. Can we
Oh, we can make him. Hold on one second.
see?
Promote to panelist. There we go. Brian Berry.
There you go. All right.
I think it's going to work.
There he is.
Yes, very nice.
There he is. Brian had brought the program to my attention a little while back, and to his credit, he has basically he's forced me to go through the process, which was great because it does a lot of introspection that you wouldn't do yourself. But this is a great way for, again, not just advisors to connect with individual clients, but also to bring to employers to share with their employees as well. And I am going to turn it over to Brian from here to actually walk you through the process. So go ahead, Brian.
Okay, well, thanks, James. And Ari, thanks for having me on here. When you said that you met James about 16 years ago, it probably answered a question that James and I get asked a lot, and that is how long have we known each other? And we tend to just him and haul around. Oh, it's 15 years, maybe 17 years. So I think James will just go ahead and settle on 16 and call it that. So uh, so I appreciate James everything you did, and I think you probably allowed us to jump ahead a few slides and get people some good information, but get them onto their Friday afternoon. All right, I don't know if James has told you, but we are coming to you from the snowy South. Charlotte is supposed to turn into Boston over the next day or two.
Yeah, we're supposed to get 3 inches tomorrow, I think, and it's gonna. I
Yeah,
have to go to New Jersey to meet Will Cooley again for the 50th time.
yeah. So with Charlotte getting somewhere between 4 to 7, I think the entire city will be shut down for about a week and a half. So,
Or-
um, but anyhow, so the situation I'll jump into a little bit is I was in the industry for a little over 25 years, and that's how I met James. James became my ERISA expert, and I've been to a couple of the baseball stadiums for some of your events. I actually sold my practice a little over 7 years ago, and spent a year actually seeking purpose. So, but what it revolved around was as I would meet with clients or 401k participants, they were participating in the 401ks, and they could tell you things like they couldn't tell you really the why. They could tell you the things about the 401k. I need to save for retirement. Well, why do you need to save for retirement? Well, I want to be able to see my grandkids. I want to be able to travel. And they could give you these lists of goals, but not really with purpose. Some time ago, I heard a podcast from Kitsis and Carl, and I actually reached out to Carl a week or so ago to ask him for permission to mention this one particular podcast where he talked about his statement of purpose that he would have clients do. And I really love the concept, and uh, it's exactly what my purpose plan can do. It's actually a tool to help you, for you to give to your clients to help them define more than just the I need $2 million when I'm 65, and really dive into the why. What am I trying to accomplish with that? So one of the things that we found when I was in the business, and a lot of you probably have similar stories, is that the participants knew they had to save. They could go through the planners and figure out how much they were supposed to be saving, and they participated. They got the match, but in terms of staying on top of the investments or knowing what to invest, they either this isn't speaking poorly of investment options in 401ks. I don't mean for it to come across that way, but the simple thing would be we'll choose the asset allocation fund that puts me in 65-35 based on my age, and I guess I'll be good with that. Um, and honestly, if you would talk to them and ask them, well, do you know why that works well for you? Well, because I'm 55 and that's what the planner said. Um, so what that creates though is a sort of level of disengagement, um, and and a forgetfulness for some folks. I mean, I think a lot of the advisors watching this probably know they've met with people before that have 3 or 4 401k balances out from previous employees that they don't really watch, and so there was no why for them to pay attention to those and understand what was going on. So we wanted to create a tool that would help advisors become not just trusted or respected because they got great performance, but more trusted and respected and loved because they could give the clients something that would really prove that they really cared why they were doing this and they wanted to dive into it. Um, so that's what we want to do. And Kitsis, again, to touch him on this one, um, pointed out over the years that most clients, when you ask them what their goals and objectives are, they're surface level answers. And they may not ever really get to exactly what matters to them. If we want to jump ahead a slide, um, and I guess we'll do it that way. All right. I didn't know you were going to be running the slides until late, so I apologize.
I know how to
Um,
multitask, so
you,
it's
you
fine.
you're doing a great job. So a lot of research has been done on ideas about engagement and how higher engagement of clients coincides with higher confidence in their financial future, higher confidence in their relationship with their advisor. Um, And even more importantly, if they felt like that relationship was tight and their advisor was really engaged, about three-quarters of those, it was over 13,000 folks who work with advisors that were quizzed on this. And about three-quarters of them said that working with that trusted advisor uh, made them less concerned during market volatility. One of the things that Carl does with his statement of purpose is if a client comes in to talk, if you guys have heard the podcast or know him, it's basically just, well, here's your purpose statement. Has anything changed with that? And it just changes the direction of where the conversation can go and where the client starts to focus. Um, when we talk about, if we go just to the next one, one of the things that we talk about, we sit down with clients and we always, one of the first things we talk about, let's talk about your goals and objectives. What do you want to do with this money? Well, goals and purpose are really two different things. And I want to focus a little bit on that. We look at goal is, I want to say for retirement. And you can even give it a number. I want to have $100,000 a year for retirement. And that's a goal, but oftentimes that goal ends up being affected by performance. So my target performance rate may need to be higher based on how much I can save and what the numbers are. And what we can solve for is math, right? So, and we can plan for that. But it's not as aspirational as folks would think. And what I mean by that is if performance lags, their confidence in the plan is going to start to lag and wane. They could become distracted by the other bright, shiny object advisor down the road. And so our feeling is that if we look at purpose as something that's more aspirational, instead of, I want to say for retirement, an aspirational purpose would be something like I want to create an environment where my descendants never have to make a choice between A and B, between paying rent or paying the utility bill. Or in my case, one of the reasons that I sold my practice 7 years ago was I went through a pretty significant illness, and so now one of my goals would be, well, I want to enjoy retirement and be healthy, which is true, but it's not really purpose. One of my purposes, and James, I've shared this with James, but one of my purposes is literally to contribute to a society where kidney disease is no longer a thing and that no one has to suffer through daily dialysis. Now, I mentioned I went through a medical crisis and I'm talking about kidney issues, so you can probably put one and one together. Yeah, but that becomes purpose. So when I wake up in the morning, if the previous day was awful, or you wake up on a Tuesday morning to find out the market was down 900 points yesterday because somebody sneezed the wrong way, it no longer becomes a distraction from what the ultimate end destination is. So, and I think it leads itself to being able to sit down with your client and say, is this still your purpose? Yes. Okay. Everything that we are doing is still in line with helping you achieve that purpose. And I think it just changes the dynamics of the conversation. Jumping ahead one more slide, what my purpose plan was created for was to uh, provide a tool that could serve as an anchor for decision making, sort of how I just explained it. That was something that would just reduce all the noise, improve follow through. So you spend all this time creating a plan or drawing up your investment policy statement. Purpose is the one thing that will help that client follow through on all the advice they've just paid you to give them. And that's the tool that we've created here. And how we see this is that we see purpose as being inspirational, right? Um, it's functional. And because of that, it serves as this tool that will anchor decisions. Moving forward, we have found out that, to the next slide, when purpose is present, all the planning you've done sticks because you can bring folks back to that. Just like what Carl does with his statement of purpose. How we've created this, and it's not just for advisor-client relationships. My purpose plan can be used in a number of different directions. As James mentioned, it's for businesses also, and we work with several Chick-fil-A franchises on this, and we work with churches, but it's also very applicable, and the design was taking my history and conversations with James and other advisors into account when we designed how this could be used. It's very flexible. Folks can use it in a number of ways. But it's designed to be a purpose to performance platform. We identify purpose, it'll lead to performance. Performance can explain the outcomes that happen. Hey, because your target rate of return was 8% and we hit 9, great, yeah, we're there. Or if it doesn't, if we underperform, we can explain that that's what impacted the outcome. The only way that creates motivation is temporary. If we underperform it, it's going to temporarily create motivation to try to make more, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't anchor anything. Um, so what getting your clients or sharing this with your clients to use does is just simply set an anchor on where we are. Um, the great thing about my purpose plan is it's not another system. You don't have to learn this. You don't have to download and take classes on how to use it. It's a front end engagement tool that you direct your clients towards or provide to them, and it's a relationship multiplier. We go through a couple of next steps. You'll understand what that does. What it really does is give clients a tool to just clarify what really matters, connect their priorities, and just build the support structure, which is what purpose does. Purpose helps build structure to things to support their lives. So pretty quickly, I'll just show you a couple of screenshots of what the app looks like. Um, no real sales pitch here. Just want to show you what your client would see. If we go one more slide forward, Ari. It's available as an app on your phone. It's on the desktop as well. It's AI driven. We've created this though, and let me back up a little bit. Even with Carl with his statement of purpose, if you ask your client what's their purpose for this, most likely you're going to get some hemming and hawing, a couple of words, but they're still really going to be goals. They're not going to be like the underlying purpose of these goals. So this has been designed, and the original partner for this was also in the industry for more than 25 years. So he and I have a background in what you guys are doing, and we've sat at the same tables you sat at. So a lot of that went into account. We don't want you to have to do any other work. We want you as advisors to benefit from your clients doing the work on this. They simply create an account. The AI takes them through a process of identifying things that they want to accomplish, legacies they want to leave behind, skills they have, and walks them through creating a purpose statement. It can be something very simple, it can be something very detailed. It just depends on them. But what we really want to create and have is a situation that once they do this, they share it with you. You can now implement it into your financial plan or have it right there with them when you have your meetings, or if they call in a panic or anything else, you can take them right back to this. And it's a simple question: has anything changed with this? Um, the greatest part about this is they can go into this and model it, change it, update it. They can create very specific things to drive in here in 4 different areas of life. You don't necessarily need to worry about that as the advisor. We take care of actually communicating that with the client. We push them, we send them notifications. Hey, you haven't checked on this in a while, you need to update it. Have you shared this with your key advisors? So there's lots of push from our side to engage with their professionals. Just as an example of what this might look like to give you some idea of why would I do this. We use an example that you guys probably have hundreds of in your practices. In this case, we use David as an example, who's in his mid 50s. He's worked all his life. He's now got the young kids are now adults, and his priorities and responsibilities have changed. So he meets with you to discuss those. You direct him to my purpose plan. You can gift it to him or send him to it on his own. He runs through this, sends you his purpose statement, and now you just redirect what you're doing for him or adjust. And what's going to happen with him is the next time you come into your meeting, he's going to understand that you really do know exactly what he's trying to get at. You can bring him back to that. It can be your North Star for all your future discussions. And if you jump ahead a couple of slides, all right, it'll be the one titled "How This Works for You." Um, yeah. This is one of the most important parts about it. We really did not want an advisor to have to spend hours learning another software or having to hire someone to go through this. This is all on the client to use. It's very easy to implement. Uh, you can include the link on your website, on your menu of services if you want. We can white label it for you if you'd like to. The client does all the work on this. Once they go through it, they can share any of these things that they want with you. It's not going to clog up your system. It comes to you as a text or an email, a snapshot of what the purpose statement is. Um, but when you have this at the meetings, the money's no longer going to be the main object. You can start every meeting off or just draw things back to purpose and then show them we've taken this into account. This is everything we do is based on helping you achieve that purpose. It becomes very impactful for clients. The advisors that we've begun to work with are already getting feedback on this. And one of the most important things, one more slide because we're going to land this thing pretty quickly, is the items on the right-hand side of this in the green box. These are summaries of feedback that we're getting from folks that are telling us that the engagement with their client increases, that their satisfaction is becoming even deeper. One of the things that I think would be important for advisors also is that the advocacy from those clients is much more natural. They're actually telling their friends that, did your advisor, by any chance, do they really know what your purpose is? And they send them right to you to do this. Probably as important as retention strengthens for any of you who are concerned about that. But this is why we wanted to share it with you and why James actually reached out a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, I want you to share this with folks. We just want you to look at it. If it's something that resonates with you and you think you'd like to see more, here's the QR code. It'll take you right to the website. You can play with it on your own. The process of creating a purpose statement for any of you all who go to it, it's free. You can go through it and go through the AI and see how it works. There's no pitch here. There's no pressure. If you go through it, you're not going to get tons of emails from us going, hey, you haven't set up an appointment. We really want to see if this will be a tool that'll work for you guys. There's tons of context on the site. I think you'll enjoy it. The focus here is that from our standpoint, performance builds credibility. Purpose actually builds loyalty. And so I hope that resonates a little bit with you. Some of the contact information is on the next slide. Michael Thaler, who is the founder and main creator of this, was in the investment advisory field for I think 27 years. He and I, this is a great story for some. Our offices were 2 miles from each other. We met a year ago, and we both were in the business almost the exact same time frame. So we think that there was a purpose as to how we got together, actually. So any of the three of us, there are others. We'd love to talk to you about it if you want to see it. Awesome. The best part for this is my purpose plan is available through subscription. It's $6 a month per user. Not something that breaks the bank. And for some of the advisors that are beginning to gift it to their clients, it also, on an annual basis, doesn't cause a problem as a gifted item. So, James, thanks for allowing me to share this with folks. Ari, thanks for allowing me to come on. Happy to answer any questions that might come up.
Brian, appreciate it. Ari, as always, thanks for having us. Again, just the differentiators are becoming more and more similar nowadays in the industry. So being able to find something completely different, obviously, is always a help with regards to not just retention, but from a prospecting perspective as well.
Yes, we have some advisors that actually use it as a precursor to coming to meet with them for the first time. They actually send their prospects to it and go, hey, before we meet, I'd like for you to go do this.
Cool.
Perfect. There are no questions.
Great. Well, again, appreciate the time, Ari. Appreciate everything. And everyone, have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thanks. And that really concludes that 401k National Virtual Conference. Like I always say, our live events, we're going to be in April in Chicago, Denver in May, and Washington, D.C. in September. And of course, thank you for the one person who bought my book today. I appreciate that. That 401k Plan Provider Handbook is available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon.com. So I appreciate that. And of course, tune in next year for that 401k National Virtual Conference. Thanks so much. And it'll be up on YouTube probably later today. Thanks so much.